like I built this town. Steps so light, I barely touch the ground. And everybody wants to know how. Brick by brick, I put them in the ground. Walk like I built, walk like I built this. I do it for my people, family business. And everybody wants to know how. Take a good look, you are now witness.
Wake up, it's a brand new day. I got a fresh breath and a full plate. Wake up, this is not a game. I'll take my fresh breath and go my own way. This is what I live for. This is what I live for. This is what I live for. This is what I live for.
Measure my growth by the seasons. Limits don't exist if you don't give them reason. But everybody wants to know how. I built this dream and never had a doubt.
Walk like I built this town. Steps so big, I shook the fucking crowd. Everybody's coming at me now. I'm never coming down. This is what I live for. This is what I live for. This is what I live for. This is what I live for.
Don't look back. Don't look back at me. And act like I didn't tell you everything I'm about. I'll tell you what I live for. I'll tell you what I live for.
Wake up, this is what I live for. This is what I live for. This is what I live for. Days like this is what I live for. This is what I live for. Days like this is what I live for. Wake up, this is what I live for. This is what I live for. Wake up, this is what I live for. This is what I live for.
Walk like I built this town. Steps so light, I barely touch the ground. And everybody wants to know how. Brick by brick, I put them in the ground. Walk like I built, walk like I built this. I do it for my people, family business. And everybody wants to know how. Take a good look, you are now witness.
Wake up, it's a brand new day. I got a fresh breath and a full plate. Wake up, this is not a game. I'll take my fresh breath and go my own way. This is what I live for. This is what I live for. This is what I live for. This is what I live for.
Measure my growth by the seasons. Limits don't exist if you don't give them reason. But everybody wants to know how. I built this dream and never had a doubt.
Walk like I built this town. Steps so big, I shook the fucking crowd. Everybody's coming at me now. I'm never coming down. This is what I live for. This is what I live for. This is what I live for. This is what I live for.
Welcome to the Dire Wolf Show, where we believe that America is exceptional and that our constitutional rights should never be infringed. I am Dire Wolf. On our show, we bring you the truth and debunk fake news. If you love laughing at the insanity of the regressive left, sit back and relax. Boy, do I have a show for you. Welcome back, Wolfpack. Dire Wolf here for our weekly news recap behind enemy lines on YouTube, where speech is not free and the truth is demonetized. Alongside me is my co-host, Fox Trevize. How you doing, buddy?
Oh, pretty great. How you doing today?
Doing all right. Yeah, those Chinooks, they really like using those for special forces, but I think they're a terrible idea. Anytime you get they want to get more special forces in.
I don't know what you're talking about.
The double rotored aircraft you saw in the video.
Gotcha.
So the goal
the
is
helicarrier.
Yeah, the goal is to get more special forces into the theater at one time, right? But the bigger you make the aircraft, the slower and easier it is to hit. So if it does get hit, you lose more people. Whereas if you bring lots of small helicopters in, if one gets hit, you've only lost a smaller portion of the team.
You know, I think this could all be solved with the only troop carrier you ever would need in any situation, and that is the Bradley fighting vehicle. It is,
you know what? You're right.
The superior troop carrier.
Yes, the troop carrier that can only carry 5 people. The tank that can only fire.
So you were just complaining that the helicopter carries too many people, and then now you're upset because the Bradley doesn't carry enough people. What do you want, Dyer? What do you want? I know what you want. Dyer wants F-35s. Yes,
F-35 troop carriers, one person at a time. They got to eject into the theater.
That's.
I love the idea. Let's do it. Okay, so guys, we're I don't know if you guys have heard, but Trump has got a new Twitter website called Getter.
Getter, yes.
So hey, we're on Getter. So you can follow us on Fox at Fox Trevize or at Direwolf or at Foxes.
Yes,
is that real?
I got the at Foxes handle, the FOXES. I got the at Foxes handle. At Wolves was reserved though, so we were unable to get the at Wolves
because wolves are far more famous and important.
Apparently. So which channels did you get, Dyer? Did you get just Direwolf or did you get Direwolf Media?
I got Direwolf. I believe it's Media because Direwolf was already taken.
Direwolf was already taken. Wow. Okay.
Yeah,
so follow Dyer at Direwolf Media on Getter, and follow me at Fox Trevize, which I believe is the let's see here. Yeah, that's the so you're at Direwolf Media, and then I'm at Fox Trevize again. So our handles on our our characters are once again correct, since I've been kicked off Twitter for more than a year now. But our handles are now correct if you are following us on Getter. I plan on starting to use that next week, and maybe if I can get which I think Getter actually has an API, which was a big problem with Parler, was that you couldn't use bots on Parler, which I suppose if you don't like bots, like that's fine, but that also precluded having fun accounts. Like I really like following picture accounts, like especially Fox and Cute Animal accounts. And there's a really great, that's all I use Twitter for anymore, is just following picture accounts mostly. And it's a good way to have a content base to get people over there. Parler was just all politics all the time, nothing else. And it's like, okay, I mean, I guess that's interesting, but I want... It's supposed to be social media, not like
I want
political.
cute foxes, goddammit.
I do want cute foxes. So I hope Getter kind of is able to be a better clone of Twitter in that it has a broader base of things that you're able to do with it. I guess that remains to be seen. So far, a lot of people have liked the interface. I haven't been able to use it very much. I do know that they're having issues with onboarding people. I was unable to sign up for an account over the web interface, but I downloaded the Android app and I was able to set up an account on that. So if you're having problems setting stuff up, try using the mobile app. I believe that they were intentionally blocking new users on the web interface just from trying to keep their servers from overloading, though I assume that they will be expanding soon here. So hopefully this works. So this is like Trump's big thing that he was working on. So hopefully it becomes something, because we definitely need competition with Twitter. So follow Dyer and I over on Getter.
Yes, and we had a question about will we be leaving DLive and YouTube because it's terrible, and DLive because it buffers a lot. Hopefully DLive unfucks itself at some point. That'd be nice. They are better than they were when we first started. But we also are on Rumble. So it's not posted. It's not live, but it is posted there afterwards. So we are there technically. If you have any other ideas, let me know. I'm open.
Yeah, so Rumble is working on live streaming. They're not there yet, though. Crowder is pushing them to do so. They've promised Crowder that they would have it up relatively shortly here, so probably within the next couple of months, maybe by the end of next quarter. That's my anticipation for it. So luckily, Crowder is a big enough player that he can kind of push that along, since he would like to also not be on YouTube, just like we would. So hopefully we can follow in his footsteps, and he'll get Rumble on board with live streaming. But like Dyer said, we do mirror over to Rumble after the stream. It's just Rumble doesn't have live streaming for anybody. If you are having problems with DLive, DLive is very sensitive to certain regions. It works better in some areas than others. If you would like to, we usually recommend to watch on YouTube, or are we still on Twitch? Dyer?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yes,
so
yes, we are.
You can watch on either YouTube or Twitch, and then chat on DLive is usually what we recommend if you're having streaming problems.
Yeah, Twitch seems to be working just fine.
Yep. All right.
So, as always, we have a great show for you tonight. That's yeah. But first, we have to thank our sponsors. This show is only possible because.
Did you just agree with that sentence?
No. Like I was gonna say something about that's pretty positive of us to say that about our own show. Hopeful, maybe. we would like to especially thank those of you that donate to us financially, which is including Kaylet, Orymane, Nathan Cameron, Tetris Freak, Slowpoke, Thunder Erican, who's female by the way, and the White Lion, who is a lion, and Timberwolf, who is a wolf. Money isn't the only way you can give, though. We also appreciate you liking, subscribing us on DLive, Twitch, YouTube, and especially like when you share links to the channel on any social media you happen to find yourself on, which could be Getter this time, as we are no longer being supported by the algorithm is trying to strangle us to death. So that'll be able to help us out.
Yes.
All right, let's do our first story.
All right. So our first story is Ohio, the state. They a little bit of a freak out panic moment in the Ohio State House this week when there was a bill that went through, and some of the Democrats didn't like what the bill was about. And so they did what Democrats do and acted very rationally and adultly in their dissent of what they thought was a bad idea. So our first story tonight comes from, like I said, Ohio. Like many states, Ohio is working to better regulate high school athletics so that boys are not able to compete in girls' sporting events. Ohio's Congress has been unable to get this bill out of committee, though. So like Ohio had their own independent, self-standing bill that would prevent boys from competing in girls' sports. But they've been unable to get that out of committee for whatever reason. So Republican State Rep Jenna Powell tried to get around this by introducing the key text of that bill as an amendment in another bill that was likely to pass. The following video is from the Ohio House floor when she offered the amendment. Let's watch that. Maybe.
Mr. Speaker, I move to amend with Amendment 1594.
The chair has the amendment. The amendment appears to be in order. The representative may proceed.
Wonderful. The Save Women's Sports Act is a fairness issue for women to be able to achieve their dreams in athletics in our state. And is crucial to preserving women's rights and the integrity of women's and girls' sports. Across our country, female athletes are currently losing scholarships, opportunities, medals, education, and training opportunities. This amendment will require schools that are part of the OHSAA to designate separate teams for participants of the biological sex. No school interscholastic conference or organization that regulates interscholastics shall permit biological males to participate on athletic team or an athletic competition designated only for biological female participants. Currently, OHSAA allows biological males to compete against biological females if they either completed a year of hormone therapy, demonstrated they do not possess physical.
Please state what rule, constitutional provision, or statute has been violated.
Who is raising the point of order? Representative House? Okay. What is your point of order?
Thank you.
So, as you could hear in the background there, the Democrats, following parliamentary procedure by slamming on their desks as hard as they could, giving guttural howls. Some might call it a screech. That's I
Definitely not adult children, right?
raising the bar for political discourse, for sure.
We should all aspire to be that mature, right?
Yes.
That's the kind of people we want making laws and policy in our country. I want to point out he was a kind of saying point of order, but also not saying that at all. But you could that is not an excuse. Like, oh, they didn't hear my point of order, so I'm just gonna gutturally scream like a fucking petulant child.
I almost feel bad for transgenders if they weren't so unbearable in their politics, but like that's who they have defending them and like trying to like propagate their belief system into law. Like, that sucks. I mean, I at least want to have a discourse about it. It might be valuable, but you can't really engage with that. There's no substance there. It's just actual screeching, which is funny because that's kind of like the meme, right? Is like triggered leftists, like all they can do is screech. The image of the girl in the green coat at Trump's inauguration just screeching at the sky. I think maybe she was in that room at that point. But it's just such a meme at this point, and the Democrats are embodying, they're becoming the meme. It's hilarious.
So, just to clarify one thing, just like you being a gay person are not represented by the gay and movement in LGBT movement, rather.
Correct.
There are trans out there who are conservative, in the military, not at all represented by the trans movement.
Yeah, I'll amend my statement by saying I feel bad for the trans activists that they are. This is what they are represented by.
Yeah, I definitely don't have my compassion for someone who is trans affected by these complete nutcases that say that they represent them when they really don't. They just want power. That's what all this politics is about, is power.
Yeah. One of the things that's interesting about this is Ohio's governor, Republican Mike DeWine, has said that he was hopeful that there wouldn't be a bill either way, that he really just wanted this to be left as a local decision. He didn't want Ohio to take a stance one way or the other. Yeah, it's absolute cowardice. And what that really does is that just, if the state is not making a decision on this one way or the other, then that just leaves all of the individual parents in all of the many cities of every state, like, they're just left without guidance, and they have to have these fights like city by city instead of just having the state come in and say, no, we're going to enforce Title IX. We're going to protect the sanctity of women's athletics. There's a reason why they were separated out as part of Title IX. We aren't going to be remerging them just because some people are mentally confused. And instead, now every location now has to have this battle on an individual city by city level, and they also open themselves up to these parents that are on the other side that say, hey, maybe we need to be keeping boys out of girls' sports. they now open themselves up to civil lawsuits because the state hasn't made a decision on it. So they aren't following any particular legal guidance on this. And really, what Ohio and other states need to be able to do is say, nope, this is the state law. We have made a decision on it one way or the other. And you know what? If DeWine wants there to be transgenders in girls' sports, I guess if that's what he wants, well, then he should be advocating for a law that has it the other way. Every state needs to be very clear on this one way or the other. I would prefer that every state go and support women's sports. I think that's important. I guess I'm a misogynist. That I think that women deserve to have their own spaces in sports. But every state needs to be very clear on this one way or the other, just so that you don't have to have these battles at the city level. And then if a state decides we're going to allow this, then that allows people the ability to make a decision if they want to move or not. But just leaving everything in this kind of cloudy ambiguousness, it is very cowardice.
I remember when the women's sports used to be a civil rights issue. It used to be that.
Oh, you're not that old.
I know, but I remember when people believed that still.
Yeah.
So women actually fought for the women's sports to be recognized so that women could get scholarships and be treated in the same way that men were. However, competing against men that were clearly superior physically would have kept women out from ever being able to compete for those kinds of scholarships. And allowing them to have that was a good thing. That now civil rights has gone back the other direction, is now taking that away from them. It's quite funny how our history works, huh?
Yeah.
Are we actually doing the Gwen Berry story here?
I had a picture for it, so I thought we
Okay.
would. I do want to say one more thing on the sports thing, though. So, the state that I'm from, I was a swimmer in high school, and my dad was one of the swim officials. It's like a referee for swimming, and he continued to do that long after I graduated. And I think about 2 or 3 years ago, the athletics association that governed the state put out guidance about transgender swimmers. And they essentially, because in swim in particular, there's regulations on the types of swimsuits that boys and girls wear. And they have to be, there's certain different kinds. And obviously, the boys are wearing a different kind. They have different standards for their suits than the girls do. So it's very important for a regulation level, what uniform are you essentially wearing when you're swimming, as to which gender you're competing with. And because of the confusion, there was a desire from the Athletics Association to allow females identifying as males but still wanted to compete in the female group to be able to wear a male-regulated suit. To try and clean up that wacky sentence, they essentially wanted girls to be able to go topless at a high school swim meet. And they had given instructions to my dad and the other officials throughout the state, different ways that they could be inspecting these high school children's apparent genitalia to make a decision about what kind of suits they should be wearing and whether or not it was within regulations. And my dad, along with almost the entire state's worth of officials, said nope, and they walked off. And essentially, my state, for a real hot second, had nobody to officiate any high school swimming events at all. And the Athletic Association ended up having to temporarily reverse their decision until they could come out with better guidance as to what they were going to do. Because, as you could imagine, most of the officials are parents of high school age children, and them being advised to act like pedophiles was not going to fly with them. So that's one of those things. But the reason why something like that happens, and the reason why they got put in that position, is because the state didn't make a decision one way or the other. And so you have these random organizations just coming up with whatever the hell they feel like and putting out this bad guidance. And, what are you supposed to do about it? Luckily, there was enough involved parents that said, nope, we're just not gonna do it. Like, we're not even gonna fight about it. We're just done. Everybody's retiring. We're all done today, which was great that they were able to do that. But that was 3 years ago, and this march has not stopped. And I'm hesitant to imagine what other states did in that case, because I imagine that there was probably some states that were just like, oh yeah, that's fine. Like, you're advising us to be, act like pedophiles. Like, okay, whatever. But it would really be helpful for the state to step in. The state has already made, the federal government has already made a decision as to what the regulations are between men and women's sports. That's all of a sudden just gone out the window because wokeness, I guess. And it would be great for the individual states to come back in and say, nope, we're not letting this go off the rails. Title IX was there for a reason. We're going to reiterate that is the law of the land, and it's not up for debate.
Yep. On a slightly related story, you guys may have seen Gwen Berry, the track and field runner,
who may or may not be a man.
So Gwen Berry is possibly not a man. Jury's still out. We're not willing to make a ruling on this until she gives a public statement and maybe a genetic testing and photos and affidavits, whatever, some sort of evidence to show that she is not a man, because we don't want to decide for her. We just don't want to assign her a sexuality that she doesn't really have, right? That'd be bigoted of us, right?
Yes.
So
absolutely.
Someone who is currently Schrodinger's sexuality had a bit of a fit. She placed third place in a run in Olympic trials.
No.
And while they were on
third place in hammer throwing.
Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. That was hammer throwing. My apologies. In any case, she was on the podium, and the anthem played as it did at the same time every day during the trials. And she said that she had been assured that the anthem would not play while competitors were on the podium, but they weren't actually. That wasn't actually the policy. It played at the same time every day. She didn't put her hand to her chest or look at the flag. She turned her back to the flag, and then near the end, she took out a shirt that was definitely not planned, that had black activist on it, and put it over her head.
Oh, come on, Dyer. You don't just have a back pocket black activist shirt that you just, for special occasions? Like,
no, she definitely didn't plan that. That was by chance. I'm not trying to impugn her character at all, or call her a liar. I would not do that, especially when she afterwards said that she felt like she was set up, by our national anthem being played at our Olympic trials.
Yeah, to clarify what you're saying there. So she said that the fact that they played the national anthem at the U.S. Olympic trials, that was a setup, because as we all know, the national anthem is highly offensive to all black people, and you would only ever play it when a black person happens to get up on the podium just to spite them. If it was an all-white podium, they would definitely not have played it.
What I love about all of her comments, which I did not do right at this segment, but all of her comments were very self-centered, like the world revolves around her. She's so fucking vain, as are like most of the left-wingers, that she thinks that the anthem being played and that flag being flown was just to spite her. No, the flag isn't about you. The song isn't about you. It's about our country. It's about everyone who died and has served to protect this country, and it's to represent everyone and the freedoms and liberties of everyone in the country. It has jack shit to do with you personally. So fucking vain.
Yeah. DLive says that they've given us a mature tag because of political content, and I think that's interesting because I've seen gaming content, and
there's gaming content out there where it's just like half nude. Fuck off.
Yeah, jeez. That's crazy.
Like, it's like a small box of game and mostly the gamer girl, like, barely dressed playing the game.
Yeah, one more.
Oh.
So as you guys can see here, Gwen Berry has quite the mouth when it comes to Twitter here. She's got all kinds of these very racist tweets, some jokes about rape, and anti-Asian tweets, I believe, as well. So those are starting to come out. So maybe she shouldn't have rocked the boat that hard because nobody's perfect, especially when you are on Twitter. And so I'm eagerly awaiting to see if she gets canceled, and then definitely after she gets canceled,
he
or she
open-minded here.
Yes, gets canceled. Whether or not them will come out against cancel culture.
I think that if they don't like our country or our anthem or our flag, maybe they shouldn't be picked to wear our flag and represent our country at the Olympics.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And there's been a civil congressman and people from the sports, the sports, all of them actually. A lot of people who are in and around the Olympics and in Congress and just kind of general commentators have all called, if she doesn't want to do it, there's plenty of people behind her who would love to.
Because this is a
America.
privilege to
Yes,
represent our
is.
country.
So if she doesn't want to represent the country, that's fine. Then she doesn't need to be up on the podium. She doesn't have to go. That's great.
And it's also, if she was going to do this here, how much more likely would she like to make it all about her on a stage, an international stage? I'll bet you if she goes to the Olympics, she'll do the same damn thing if she even gets on the podium. She'll do it there. And then that's actually against the Olympics rules to do a kind of protest on the podium. So she might not only, be an embarrassment to our country, but also might, embarrass us further by breaking the rules of the Olympics.
Yeah. And she's more than welcome to go compete as an unattached. The Olympics has a process for people who are unattached to a country to compete. So she's perfectly free to go do that. I don't see why she would want to participate on the U.S. team when she doesn't like the U.S., when there's other options that would still allow her to go to the Olympics.
There's other countries she can represent, too. If she thinks another country is more free, has more liberties, is better to black people, if she thinks that there's a country out there that
I don't think you can just switch countries for the Olympics, but that's why I was saying that there is another option that she would just go unattached. So,
I'm being sarcastic, but
I was being I was being serious though. Like there is other options. So for her to stay there as the U.S., there's no reason for it. She can continue on with her Olympic dream without having to represent a country that she hates.
My point is that she probably can't find a country that is more free and has better liberties than us, and that it's her protest is bullshit.
Yes. Alrighty. So our next story is
Jen Psaki.
Okay, so we have a.
Thank you.
Do you like that? I think we have some good slides today. So, all right. So Jen Psaki, she actually has one of the toughest jobs in America. Now that's not to say that she's good at it. There's a lot of people with tough jobs that do a good job at handling their tough job. Jen Psaki has a tough job, and she's bad at handling the tough job.
She has to juggle a incoherent president, a cackling witch of a vice president, and a White House that has its own opinions that are separate from those two things.
Yes.
That's a pretty difficult job.
All right, so let's see here. So this is Jen Psaki just really earning her stripes.
You mentioned at the last briefing that you think Republicans wanted to defund the police because they did not support the American Rescue Plan. Which Republican ever said that they did not like the American Rescue Plan because they wanted to defund the police?
Well, first, let me just note that the president ran and won the most votes of any candidate in history on a platform for boosting funding for law enforcement after Republicans spent decades trying to cut the COPS program. There's record of that. That doesn't require anyone having new comments, and then also stood in the way of crucial funding needed to prevent the laying off of police officers as crimes increased. That's a simple statement of fact.
I understand what you're saying there. However, there are lots of examples of Democrats explicitly saying they want to defund the police. We've got Congresswoman Cori Bush, Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Ilhan Omar. Are there any examples of Republican members of Congress saying they want to defund the police?
I think most people would argue that actions are more important than words, wouldn't you say?
Well, to that point, to your point there, at the time of the vote on the American Rescue Plan, you had the Republican leader in the Senate, Mitch McConnell. He said he just didn't like it because he thought it was a classic example of big government Democratic overreach in the name of COVID relief. And then Kevin McCarthy said he thought Democrats were using coronavirus as an excuse to justify funding pet projects.
Well,
where is we're going to vote against this because we want to defund the police?
Again, I think actions speak louder than words, Peter. So if you oppose funding for the COPS program, something that was dramatically cut by the prior administration and many Republicans supported, and then you vote against a bill that has funding for the COPS program, we can let other people evaluate what that means. It doesn't require them to speak to it or to shout it out. Their actions speak for themselves. Go ahead.
Oh man, actions speaking louder than words. Oh no. So in 2020, Trump requested, to kind of give you some background on what Jen was saying. In 2020, Trump requested $280 million less for the unconstitutional COPS program, a unconstitutional federal program that funds many public safety projects, including hiring some officers for individual cities. The portion of this money, about $170 million out of the $1.5 billion, that went to subsidizing the policing of poorly managed violent hellholes in leftist cities that refuse to protect their people.
So that's what she's referring to with was reducing that program. And that includes like a lot of things that have nothing to do with policing, like lawyers for juveniles in some cases and stuff like that. The point is that should not be federally funded, and it's just another way of the federal government getting their fingers into the managing of cities and states. But that is a far cry from the Democrats actually advocating for the local cities closing down.
Well, Dyer, I mean, let's be fair, Dyer. Let's be fair, Dyer. I mean, like, do you have any examples of Democrats overtly calling for defund the police?
I'm glad you asked that. Let's play the video.
Not only do we need to disinvest in police, but we need to completely dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department. The Minneapolis Police Department is rotten to the root.
It's not just about Black Lives Matter. It's about what does that actually mean? What do we mean when we say Black Lives Matter, which is why defund the police has become such a huge and resounding call?
Yeah, I think Democrats, we need to hire a PR marketing firm because our messaging usually gets muddled in law. People are chanting defund the police. It immediately turns off those voters who are independent and swing voters.
Los Angeles and New York officials have promised to cut their police budget, and the city council in Minneapolis, where Floyd died, has vowed to disband their police department.
A growing cry to defund the police.
I am for defunding the police.
Yes, I support the defund movement.
Our commitment is to end our city's toxic relationship with the Minneapolis Police Department. To end policing as we know it.
The Minneapolis City Council.
So I mean, this goes on and on and on and on. I don't think that we're surprising you guys that the Democrats are pro defund the police, but Jen Psaki playing one of the hardest reverse Uno cards we've ever seen. And the mainstream media backing her up on that these past 2 weeks, trying to flip it to say, oh, the Republicans are defund the police now, which is really funny because I don't understand what they think they're accomplishing in doing that. So the right already hates the mainstream media. They know the mainstream media just lies all the time. They don't pay any attention to what the mainstream media narrative is. So if the mainstream media wants to say the Republicans are defunding the police, the right is just going to say, yeah, but you're lying like you always do. Like it's not going to affect them at all. And then the left, well, the left is a bunch of fucking idiots. The chances are you're going to have a couple of idiot leftists saying, well, I want to defund the police, and the mainstream media just told me, well, the Republicans are the party of defunding the police. I'm gonna go vote for Republicans. So, like, I don't understand what the accomplishment they thought they were going for here was, because they're not going to change anybody's mind on the right, and the only thing that they do is they risk confusing the NPC leftists on their side. So I guess we'll chalk it up for a win for Jen Psaki trying to play that reverse card there, but I just don't understand what the point of that lie was. It just doesn't seem, at least normally when the Democrats lie, you can kind of see what benefit they get out of it. But this one, I just don't see what benefit they get out of it. It's just lying because they're pathological liars and they actually cannot help it.
It's not only the defunding the police, by the way. It's also the neutering of the police that the Democrats have done, where they are just doing nothing to protect their communities. Even if they were funded, they're not doing anything because they're not being allowed to actually protect their people. One of the most dangerous places to live right now is any place that's run by a Democrat. So the Democrats are obviously the ones who have defunded and crippled local police departments. You know who else also has demanded the defunding of the police? Antifa.
Great transition, Dyer. You are so awesome. Gold star. Why did I say that?
Because I wrote it. Okay, so Antifa holds a Minneapolis city council member hostage. Democrat, black, transgender, lesbian city council member Jenkins after
Nazi
a pride
fags.
event.
How dare you? Jews unique. Why would you do that?
Seriously.
Adder Lupus says fireworks everywhere. Also checking to see if you changed the donation sound.
I didn't.
We may have tried to make it quieter, but I don't know if it was actually that much quieter. Why is there? I've tried. For some reason on the mixer there is there's a mixer bar for whitelion.gif. I wonder what that goes to. White Lion,
I wouldn't turn it on.
I don't know what that is. I'm concerned about it. Okay. Yeah. So go ahead and continue there, Dyer.
Yes. Yeah. So the again, black Democrat, black, transgendered, lesbian city council member Jenkins, after a pride event, look at all the boxes we're checking here, was confronted by a person who goes by the name of DJ Hooker, who demanded she defund the police because she had recently voted to fund said police department, which is a big no-no for the Democrats. When she refused and apparently insulted him, DJ Hooker and other BLM activists held her hostage in her car for 90 minutes, not allowing her to drive home, demanding that she agree to their demands scribbled on a piece of paper. There's a video.
Is there a video? Am I supposed to click on it?
I don't feel bad for her because she's also equally a terrible person.
People still even fucking.
All right, yeah. So this is the video of her
even know why people still even fucking
being accosted
shop
by
at that
Antifa.
shit.
Or is this Black Lives Matter accosting her? Is there a difference?
We're in negotiations. We're in negotiations right now.
So here's the thing.
We're in negotiations.
That is correct, because we ain't asking no more. We're not asking no more, white lady. We demanding at this point. We're not asking. We're done asking.
This is what democracy looks like.
It now. So why don't you just sit back in your little seat and do your job and drive? How about that?
You won't let me drive.
I know. I got you, Aaron girl. I got you, Aaron girl. Hey, everybody. I got you.
Sponsored by Coke.
Let me see the signature. Let me see. Did she sign it?
Can I have a pen? She did. Andrew Jenkins really like that pen. Everyone,
Wow, so for a bunch of communists, they sure have a problem with personal property.
Definitely legally binding, right?
Somebody hold that so I can get it out.
Can she print that too?
We want to print. DJ, we need a print.
And the date.
We need a print and a date. Print and date.
2021.
Print and date.
Like
no,
that
she
matters.
Needs to print her name and date it. What's today's date? No, give it to her.
Nobody knows what day it
Print
is.
your
None of them have. Clearly, none of them have jobs or other obligations.
Exactly. If you had a job, you'd know what day.
Yeah.
Print and date. What's today's date? Somebody throw out the date. Thank you. Well, you know.
What does it say about their basic life skills that they don't even know what day it is?
Yeah. So, well, that video is only a minute and a half. That went on for like an hour and a half, actually. So they were just sitting there blocking their car in, shouting at these people, I guess. But I'm
sure they are people.
Yeah, yes, for everything they are that. So this man, I know he's dressed up like a woman, but the man in the car here, city council vice president of Minneapolis, right? And he actually was on a board all last year, and all throughout the past year been advocating for Black Lives Matter, and is a Black Lives Matter activist himself. And so it's interesting that, well, who just surrounded and accosted him? Well, it was Black Lives Matter. So apparently Black Lives Matter is not satisfied enough with his activism, and the type of activism that he's been encouraging is exactly what's going on right now. I'm sure he didn't mean for them to come attack him. No, he was much more interested in them attacking the other citizens of the city that he's on the council of, burning down buildings and accosting Cup Foods employees and all that sort of stuff. But now that they've come for him, well, that's probably going to be a little bit problematic, right? Seeing this, I think that the initial reaction on the right was like, "Oh my God, this is terrible! How could they do that to a sitting council member?" But given that council member, this is the type of activity and behavior that he's been advocating for
asking
over a
for,
year,
yeah.
I think that this needs to be more of a standard in leftist cities. I think that city council members need to be held more accountable to their constituency. I guess other commentators on the right saw some kind of a public official being accosted by Black Lives Matter, a black extremist terrorist organization. I just saw a city councilman interacting with the constituents that they support and that supported them. So I don't really see why this is really anyone else's business. To comment on it, if these are the people that he represents. He specifically is representing Black Lives Matter interests, and Black Lives Matter has come to him with their grievances in the manner that he has encouraged them to do, very violently and aggressively. So
this is not the first time someone's been blocked and accosted while driving their car in this city, and every single time before that, he did not call it out, did not condemn it, wasn't upset about it, actually encouraged it. So if you are encouraging this happening to other people who have done nothing, then we're not going to be coming to your defense or being upset that it happened to you. This is what you want. Congratulations. You are suffering from the monster you created.
Yes. And Antifa and Black Lives Matter are rabid animals attacking anything in sight. Typically that is happening in their own cities, and they're attacking the people that voted for the policies that helped them come to power. Sometimes they're attacking other bystanders, but I think that really to solve this issue, I'm hoping that the difference now as compared to historic Marxist revolutions, because let's not parse words here. Antifa and BLM are the kind of spearhead of what is going to be an attempted Marxist revolution. Mark my words on that. Typically what we see in a Marxist revolution throughout history has always been that after the revolution, they tend to, we'll say, eat their leaders. I'm hoping that the key difference in the modern era with this Marxist revolution is that nobody has enough ability to handle delayed gratification. They all want instant results. And so what I'm hoping is that BLM and Antifa eat their leaders before the revolution. And this is an example of that happening to a lesser degree than some of the extreme examples we've seen throughout history. But to the extent that they are going to do that to their own leaders, I am not going to condemn it. I, in fact, encourage it. I think that we need to see more of this. I think the disappointing part of that video is not that a city representative, a member of government, was stopped by an angry mob of the people that they support and the people that elected him to government. I think that the sad part about that video is that there's only one of them. I think that this needs to be happening in every leftist city, every leftist member of government that encouraged and played footsie with Black Lives Matter and Antifa. They all need to be getting visits from their constituents who are airing their grievances with the people that represent them.
The problem with Marxist revolutions, and particularly Antifa and BLM in this case, is they don't know how to build anything. They only know how to destroy things. So they will tear down the government, tear down society, tear down their leaders when it comes to that. In the end, they will have the communist hellhole that they wanted.
Don't what's that saying about like don't interrupt your enemy when they're like wrong or something, or like when they're hurting themselves? Do you remember what that is?
Shoot.
I'm sure one of our very smart viewers will inform me in chat what I was trying to say.
Don't interrupt your enemy when they're making a mistake.
Yes.
So here were the demands, just for laughs, what they scribbled on that piece of paper. They wanted to, 1, form a community policing accountability commission, because I'm sure that would achieve something other than wasting money. 2, all murder cases are reopened. I'm guessing that they meant for police officers murdering, in their mind, violent criminals. And then 3, drop writing charges against Antifa and BLM members. Like, do they really need to drop them because they're kind of just releasing them already? But that was one of their demands. Then again, maybe if the Democrats suffer enough from BLM and Antifa, they might actually start holding them accountable, which, I mean, that'd be nice, I guess. But hey, you know what? Leave it up to your community if that's what they voted for. If they want to be abused and oppressed by Antifa and BLM, I mean, that's what they voted for. Let them have it. The 4th, they wanted more information regarding Winston Smith's police shooting death. As a recent shooting death, they wanted to have more information about it. Number 5, they wanted the Minneapolis mayor, Jacob Frase, to immediately resign. That's not going to happen. But you know what? How about you get people to vote for that? That's how you get that kind of change. And then 6, leave George Floyd Square alone forever. They want there to be a no-go zone, so that they can abuse people.
No, there is a no-go zone there. They've been essentially holding that entire block hostage. All of the businesses are essentially dead because they had, over the last year, as Black Lives Matter set up one of their glorious autonomous zones, essentially destroyed all of the black-owned small businesses in that area. Even with the COVID lockdowns, their small businesses were seeing a further drop in sales just because of the, murders in the area, which were continuous gunfire all around George Floyd Square, continuous black people killing black people in George Floyd Square for the last year. That was the glorious utopia that BLM has been fighting for, is the ability for black people to be able to kill other black people with impunity. Some might even call it a coliseum. I think I think that if the Democrats want to kind of live out what their fantasy is, they would probably would leave George Floyd Square alone, build some walls around it, and perhaps put up some stadium seating.
It'd be kind of too on the nose if they built a literal coliseum, but I think it makes sense.
Yeah. It's funny. The Purge movie series, they tried to the last movie tried to make it out to be this. The Purge started because people like Trump were elected and they just wanted to watch black people kill each other, and that was the goal of the Purge. And what's funny is, it's not untrue that there is a group of people in political power right now that thoroughly enjoy watching black people kill each other, and will do anything in their power to make sure that laws and regulations encourage that to happen as easily as possible. And that would just be the Democrats. George Floyd Square is a great example of that, where for really no reason, the Democrats have decided that run Minneapolis, they would much rather protect and defend this several square block region where the black murder rate in Minneapolis is absurdly through the roof, just in this one area. And why else would they be defending it? They keep pretending and trying to tell everybody like, oh no, it's because we love we love Black lives. We think that Black lives matter. And the way that they go about showing how much they think Black lives matter is by setting up this essentially lawless purge zone, and encourage Black people to kill each other. And what do I mean by encourage Black people to kill each other? Well, I mean by not sending in the police to stop them, by making sure that it is well known that if you kill people in that block, the police are not going to come do anything about it. You're free to go. So that is the Democrat Coliseum, the Coliseum theory that I came up with several months ago. It just pops up all over the place, and it keeps getting proven right over and over and over again. And this man here, the city council man, did a lot of effort to make sure that was set up. He put a lot of work into making sure that the Coliseum was set up, and the Coliseum combatants, they're coming to him to make sure that doesn't get shut down. Everybody in Minneapolis seems to love their Coliseum. It's not really my thing. I don't really enjoy it. I wouldn't want one in my city, but I guess this is what democracy looks like. If that's what they want to set up, then that's what they want to set up. Just don't bring it to my city.
Yeah, exactly. They show that Black Lives Matter when they burn down Black-owned businesses and they attack and kill Black residents and destroy the property values of Black communities, take away the jobs of Black people. That's how you show that Black Lives Matter, by making them suffer as much as possible. Wow, what a Democrat idea! I want to point out that the letter that
Triumvirate is saying, let's listen to what Jen Psaki just said. It was actions speak louder than words. Yeah, when you hear a Democrat shouting Black Lives Matter, what I want you to think of is a Roman shouting Gladiator Lives Matter.
Yeah. The funny part was that the letter they had, those demands they had signed, it was signed by the people. I guess in their mind, those 10 violent activists represent the opinions of all the people.
They certainly are people.
Yeah, and I guess this is actually an example of that white rage we've been hearing about, right?
It must be, yeah, right. I'm guessing it's the driver there, right? She's getting
right. She was the one who was causing them to be angry, right? It was her white rage that was making them trap them there for 90 minutes.
Yes.
And sign.
But Black people accosting Black people is white rage.
Black on black crime also caused by white people.
Do you think General Milley would be interested in understanding the situation?
He's definitely interested in knowing more about white rage. So if you definitely link this to white rage, he might care about it.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that the military has been working really hard on is to make sure that there's no extremist ideologies, infiltrating the military. Right? Do you think that Black Lives Matter, what they're doing here, do you think that kind of constitutes extremist activity to be entrapping officials?
So the military gives lip service to the fact that they accept that Black nationalist groups and extremist groups do exist, but they don't identify them as being like the major problem right now. And I guess they don't see this as a major problem, and that white supremacy is far more like. You remember all those times that white supremacists held city council members hostage and made them sign contracts? Do you remember all the times that happened? It happens so much more often than when it's Black nationalists, right? Right?
Yeah.
No.
No.
Oh gosh. So
do you think that do you think maybe that's the military being racist, where they think that because they're Black that they just wouldn't be as effective as the white nationalists?
I guess it could be that. I mean,
like, isn't it racist just to assume that just because they're Black they wouldn't be as effective as the white ones?
I mean, 18 months of violent riots and burning down cities, and that's not a threat. But that, one group of guys with tiki torches, that's the
U.S. military. They're looking at two sets of extremist groups. And they're like, oh well, we don't got to worry about the Black ones because they're Black and
they don't got tiki torches, so they're dangerous.
They're not going to be a threat. They don't have any leadership ability because they're Black. That's what the U.S. That's the official stance of the U.S. military right now.
Jeez Louise.
How hot of a take was that?
That was pretty hot. But I mean, it is crazy that they don't see them as a threat, even though they've done far more damage, both human and property damage.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you got to imagine like the U.S. government's like looking at these white nationalist groups, and they're like, oh my God, like they're timely. They have a merit-based system. Like, they've got a family structure. Like, man, they just have it all going for them. Like, if they ever decided to do something, it would be extremely effective.
Yeah, the military has one job, and integral to that job is to be able to recognize the reality of a threat. And it kind of troubles me that they don't seem to be able to do that.
Can I guess what the job was? You didn't specify. Can I guess what the job was?
Yes, you may guess.
Is it Raytheon's stock price?
Oh, yeah, definitely.
Oh,
it's to ensure the enrichment of government contractors.
Gotcha.
What do you think it was?
That's what I thought it was. That's why I said that.
And part of that is recognizing who are the threats that we will then spend money on bombing.
Yes. All right. So this next segment is a bit of a fun, not really a news story, just kind of a fun thing Dyer and I kind of happened to notice this week. And it started out small, and then we thought about it, and it kind of grew into this big segment that we decided we wanted to do tonight because it was kind of
like the graphic again. Good job.
That is I put a lot of work into photoshopping that to look like it did not look anything like that before I started.
Put a lot of effort into that.
I put a lot of effort into that.
All right. So the Constitution, and particularly the Bill of Rights, outlined rights that the people had and which the government couldn't do anything about. These are what are known as negative rights, or the right to not have something taken away from you. This is supposed to be this is opposed to positive rights, which is the right to receive something from someone else. The Constitution was designed to keep the government from doing things to you, not meant to empower the government to give you things it took from other people.
Over the years, these rights have eroded substantially, and the government tends to take and give whatever the fuck it wants from you. Your pre-existing rights be damned. But something interesting is starting to happen. All of a sudden, the Bill of Rights is starting to make a comeback. Not for you, mind you, but for the government itself. Yes, it seems that the protections of the Bill of Rights that was meant to protect the people that was meant to protect the people from the government is now instead being used to protect the government from the people. The following is a brief review of the Bill of Rights and how they are being used to protect the government from the people rather than the people from the government.
And trust me, it's going to blow your mind when you actually start thinking about how it's actually being applied. Amendment 1. Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof or abridging the freedom of speech or of the press or the right of the people to peaceably assemble and to petition the government for redress of grievances.
So there are several examples of this right that was supposed to be for us, the people, being claimed and used by the government itself to protect the government. Fauci, a government bureaucrat, is claiming the right to speak freely his mind on any number of topics, but not respecting that same right of the people to criticize his opinions. Throughout the past 4 years, members of the intelligence community, also government bureaucrats, have claimed the right to speak freely on public and policy matters, but have not respected that same right to speak freely of their critics. Democrat congressmen, obviously members of the government, not citizens, or not of the citizenry, last year, they claimed it was their freedom to assemble and to protest when they took a knee on Capitol Hill in honor of Black Lives Matter. But they did not show that same respect, they did not show that same respect for that same right to assemble for the January 6th crowd. One of the most pervasive claims is that teachers and professors working for government education institutions, which makes them employees of the government, claiming that they have the freedom of speech to say and teach that blacks are inferior to whites with critical race theory, and that they should be protected from members of the citizenry telling them to knock it off. The government's right to freedom of speech shall not be infringed by you, the people.
Yes. So we've learned with all those examples that the government can say anything, no matter how dishonest or damaging it is. They can even advocate for straight up racism, but then average people can't do that. They'll be held for a hate crime.
And average people are not allowed to speak out against it. I mean, just look at the story we had last week with the parents speaking out against the teachers, government teachers, teaching their children critical race theory. They were arrested by the government because the First Amendment is now being used to protect the government from the people.
Exactly. So that is insane how it's being used to protect the government and an entity and not the people. The Second Amendment is a well-regulated militia, being necessary to the security of a free state. The right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed.
Shall not be infringed. Agents of the government and the various non-military agencies and bureaucracies like the FBI, ATF, CIA, Bureau of Land Management, National Park Services, the IRS, the DOJ, etc., they all have the right to keep and bear arms. You guys might not know this. Some of you probably do. All of those agencies I just listed and more all have their own SWAT teams. Yep. Now, the federal government is authorized to maintain a standing military. They are not authorized by the Constitution to maintain a standing police and or other law enforcement.
Well, the Constitution never actually gave them the right to have a standing military either.
Oh, really?
It did? No.
I thought that was part of it. I thought that was part of border integrity. Was it? Well, that's
yeah, they actually passed a law later on that allowed them for the establishment of a permanent federal military, that when it was supposed to be, you called up the military from the militias in time of war. There wasn't a standing army. But continue, sorry.
Well, that's even more interesting. So all of those agencies that the government is not authorized by the Constitution to have created, they all have the right to keep and bear arms, again, with their SWAT teams. The IRS has a SWAT team, guys. If you guys don't, that's not a joke. I'm not making that up. You can look it up.
Pretty scary, though.
That's kind of scary. Let's see here. So each of those agencies, representatives of the government, they all have the right to keep and bear arms that shall not be infringed by any state or citizen. The Constitution provides the government to maintain the military, which Dyer just told me was wrong, so I'm obviously wrong. But it has not the same to say about the ability of the federal government to create a well-regulated militia or other groups of armed law enforcers. So there's nothing in the Constitution that's supposed to protect the government's right to maintain what are pseudo-militia, pseudo-police enforcement agencies that are bearing arms. The right of the federal government to keep and bear arms is so uninfringible that these agencies are actually allowed to carry arms and carry out operations, military-style operations or militia-style operations in any state or territory, regardless of what the local regulations are. That's right. The federal government, they have the right to keep and bear arms in D.C., in New York, in Chicago, when they're on your porch, when they're knocking your door down.
Shooting your dog.
Yes. You know? Yeah, for the citizen, try exercising your Second Amendment right in D.C. or any other liberal city. It's not going to work out very well. It would seem that the government's right to keep and bear arms is uninfringible.
Again, they have. There's a large parts of America where you cannot own a firearm. The hoops you have to jump through are prohibitive. The waiting periods are prohibitive. That you will basically are not able to have a gun at all. And yet you can have someone who's a government agent for like an hour, who's just hired, can walk through that same place with a strap and a gat, right? Can have a gun on them because they just got hired by the government.
Look how sad Florida is.
I know.
About to cry.
I would encourage all of you guys to look up the constitutional legal argument for why a federal standing military was never constitutionally permitted. and that it was basically, if we stopped funding it, there's no legal framework for even having it.
But literally all of our spending is on the military, and the other part of all of our spending is on social welfare programs, both of which were not authorized by the...
Yeah. Definitely look that up. It is an interesting read.
Maybe we'll have to do a deeper dive on that someday, because I don't think I knew that in the way that you just explained it. Maybe we'll have to do a deeper dive on that sometime.
We definitely. There's, you just read a few articles on it. There's a great. There's one I read that had multiple different arguments from different professors about the Constitution and how the military was created in the first place when it was not actually part of the Constitution, and our country didn't start with a permanent standing army.
Well, to be fair, I mean, we haven't really had a standing army because we've been at war for like 200 of like 250 years. So
that might be their excuse. So the Third Amendment, no soldier shall in peacetime be quartered in any house.
The government has but one house, the people's house, and well, we saw what happened when citizen militias tried to take up residency in the government's house. No, militiamen shall not be quartered in any government house.
The Fourth Amendment. The right against unreasonable search and seizure shall not be violated. Oh, this is a great one.
Yeah. So during COVID lockdowns, the Freedom of Information Act was essentially suspended, with the FBI citing, quote, labor shortages that would be unable to respond to any FOIA requests so long as the COVID lockdowns were in place. So that's interesting that just, you know, the government can declare an emergency, and because the government declared an emergency, suddenly the government is no longer obligated to do the things that the government said that it was obligated to do. That's interesting. The government also has a process of classification of certain kinds of information. While there are times in which keeping a secret might be necessary, the government often uses overclassification of things to avoid embarrassment rather than avoiding a national security incident. Taking these two things together, the ability for the government to just suspend FOIA at any time and to overclassify things that they find embarrassing, it would seem that the government's right to be secure in its privacy and against an unreasonable or even reasonable searches and seizures is uninfringible. The government has the right to be secure in its privacy and against unreasonable search and seizure against you, the citizen.
Even when you FOIA information that is not classified, sometimes some agencies will just not, will just like draw the process or not give you the documents for no reason. Or even when Congress petitions the FBI to provide documents, the government petitioning itself for its own documents.
It's so interesting that you would bring that up, Dyer, that they would just not respond to you. Which brings us to the next one.
The Fifth Amendment, the famous right to remain silent.
The government often claims this right to remain silent with the same classification and or just not responding to FOIA requests.
Perfect transition. Gold star.
Yes. So, you know, again, government, they have the Fifth Amendment right that protects them from the people. We skipped a few because the next Amendment 6, 7, 8, and 9 are a little more esoteric. I couldn't think of good kind of pithy examples to go with them.
I mean, 6 out of 10 is pretty good.
Pretty good. I think the other ones, if I tried a little bit harder, we could probably dig up some examples. But those are like the lesser understood by the common man kind of amendments. So it wasn't as easy to find like obvious examples for them. But so I just decided to stick with the 6 out of 10 was pretty good.
So the 10th Amendment is the powers not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively, or to the people. To the people.
This has essentially become entirely reversed. The few powers specifically delegated to the federal government, like border security and the post office, they do a terrible job at it. And the powers that were supposed to be reserved by the states and by the people, well, the many bureaucracies that make up the federal government, make up permanent Washington and the deep state, essentially exist to unreserve those powers from the states and reabsorb them into the federal government. Yes, the 10th Amendment is actually any powers not delegated to the people are reserved by the federal government.
Had I thought to remind you, it would have been nice to make a nice list of things that were not delegated to the government that they have then taken from the people.
No, it's easier just to go over the things that were delegated to them because it's like 3 things.
It's like easier. I meant like more shocking.
Yeah, it's so like the list of things that were delegated to them are 3 things. The list of things that weren't delegated to them that they took power on is all of the other things. It's infinity minus 3.
Exactly. Your right to build on your own property, your right to even own property. Nope, that's not yours anymore. There's just lots of examples.
Yes.
So yeah, good to know that this founding document, it protects the government from us. Shit.
Yes. It's actually, yeah, I'm sure you've read Animal Farm, right?
Yeah.
So do you remember when they wrote the rules up on the barn wall, and then over time they slowly changed them, and then it became, well, the leaders can do certain things if they do it in a certain way, and they just kind of slowly rewrote all of the rules that were like their founding documents.
Yeah.
It seems to be a very similar situation where we all agreed to the founding documents at the beginning, and then the government slowly started tweaking away at how we were supposed to interpret each of those line items. And then all of a sudden it just became they were reserving all of those rights to themselves, which is interesting because at least we know the government thinks that the Bill of Rights is a good idea. They just don't like that we had it. They wanted it for themselves.
They've done the best they can by the destruction of language and manipulation of language to allow for the reinterpreting of these rights to not apply to us, but to apply to them in every way. But we do have members of the Democrat Party who are like, the wording of the Constitution is still allowing people to win some legal cases. It's becoming a bit of still a burden to us with getting what we want done. So they just want to rewrite it in its entirety and remove all these rights altogether.
Yeah. So when you hear people like just basically any Democrat or the media defending the intelligence state or just the intelligence community itself talking about itself, I would say look at what they're saying within the context of the Bill of Rights. Especially do this with teachers at public schools. Now, if you're a teacher at a private school and you aren't receiving any government money, you are free to say whatever in the hell you want. And if the parents don't like it, then they can go to a different private school. But that's the point of having a private institution, is that it's just, that's what it is. It's the free market of ideas. But if you've got government teachers, they do not have the freedom of speech. There's this idea of, academic, freedoms and protecting academia and stuff like that. That was meant for non-government institutions of academia. The government wasn't ever thought of as a educating entity. So teachers that are receiving their paycheck with government money, they don't have the freedom of speech. They're the government. The government itself, I know the government's taken on the Bill of Rights as something it thinks that that defends it, but technically it doesn't. So government teachers don't have the freedom of speech. The intelligence state doesn't have the rights against search and seizure by the citizenry or by Congress. Congress doesn't have, or the agencies don't have the right to keep and bear arms any more so or less so than you do, which is interesting because some of those agencies actually get to infringe upon your rights to keep and bear arms. I would actually say that it's as legitimate for the ATF to infringe on your right to own a gun as it is for you to infringe on the ATF's right to own a gun, which is to say that neither of you really have the right to infringe on each other.
Oh, I think the ATF only exists to shoot dogs. That was a government agency created because someone really hates dogs.
Yeah, it's like the dog catchers, but like bad at it.
It's the dog catchers but SWAT division. Hey, I like how much detail you put into this graphic that Oklahoma is so far away. It's like having to squint to see what's happening at the front. Good job.
So this was a political cartoon that looked substantially different, and I like clipped little pieces out of it and rearranged them. And actually, Texas and Florida were smiling in the original, and I like clipped out their smiles and turned them upside down.
Fantastic.
And then I did make sure that I was using an M16 for the Constitution rather than an AR-15, because the AR-15 is for the people and the M16 is for dog killers like Tyre.
Yes.
God damn it. Okay. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I think that's just something that Dyer and I kind of like came up with off the cuff this week, when it was like you got all these like teachers like reeing about, oh, like I want to be able to teach critical race theory and they're infringing on free speech and stuff. And it's like, well, yeah, but you're the government. You don't have a right to free speech. Like, we've got a right to free speech. We're the citizens. We're the people. But like, as a member of the government, you're not the people. Like, yes, you are a person, but if you're a teacher being paid by the government, if you're acting in your capacity as a teacher, then you're acting in your capacity as the government. And when you're acting in your capacity as the government, you do not have the right to freedom of speech.
Yep.
Alrighty. So, we are ready for our next story, and Dyer is asking for the highlights, because I didn't highlight anything on this story, but that's because I intentionally did not highlight anything, because we're going to be watching a video, and Dyer can just improv on it. All right. So, do you want to give? Why don't you read this first part here, Dyer? I'll let you do that.
Oh, thanks. Throw me a bone. So on Monday of this week, Tucker Carlson made the bombshell allegation that the NSA was spying on him personally. It wasn't shocking that the NSA would spy on anybody, but the fact that he's there, he has evidence that they're spying on him personally and his Fox News media team. So let's see those allegations from him.
All right.
Actual federal policy. Actual federal policy. The war on terror.
Oh, this stops playing every time I click off of it. That's convenient. Hold on a second.
Terror, now ongoing for 20 years, has pivoted in its aims. The war on terror is now being waged against American citizens, opponents of the regime. We saw this on display on January 6th. We told you a couple of weeks ago, based on language in publicly available indictments, that the FBI clearly had foreknowledge of the riot at the Capitol that day. And the agents we spoke to this weekend confirmed that is true. Quote, the FBI had sources in that crowd, confidential sources, snitches. That's 100% certain. But it's not just political protesters the government is spying on. Yesterday, we heard from a whistleblower within the U.S. government who reached out to warn us that the NSA, the National Security Agency, is monitoring our electronic communications and is planning to leak them in an attempt to take the show off the air. Now, that's a shocking claim, and ordinarily we'd be skeptical of it. It's illegal for the NSA to spy on American citizens. It's a crime. It's not a third world country. Things like that should not happen in America. But unfortunately, they do happen, and in this case, they did happen. The whistleblower, who is in a position to know, repeated back to us information about a story that we are working on that could have only come directly from my texts and emails. There's no other possible source for that information, period. The NSA captured that information without our knowledge and did it for political reasons. The Biden administration is spying on us. We have confirmed that. This morning we filed a FOIA request, a Freedom of Information Act request, asking for all information that the NSA and other agencies have gathered about this show.
No doubt the NSA will invoke its Fifth Amendment rights to remain silent.
Yes. I mean, this is not new, but I thought the clip was over. Keep going.
Formality. We've also contacted the press office at both NSA and the FBI. We don't expect to hear much back. That's the way that usually goes. Only Congress can force transparency on the intelligence agencies, and they should do that immediately. Spying on opposition journalists is incompatible with democracy. If they are doing it to us, and again, they are definitely doing it to us, they are almost certainly doing it to others. This is scary, and we need to stop it right away.
So Yeah, this happened when during the Obama administration. Biden was a part of that as well. They had the FBI was caught red-handed, monitoring James Rosen, calling him a criminal conspirator because he was making articles critical of the Obama administration, just because he made news articles critical of the president. He was seen as a criminal co-conspirator. And there's even one journalist where the FBI was caught, or some other agency was caught, having uploaded a classified document to a journalist's laptop, and they had the trail of when the file was loaded and how it was loaded onto the hacked computer. They caught them doing this. So if they can do that to a journalist, then what else could they put on your computer? Just because
it raises some questions about who did what and when during the 2016 election with certain things that were said to be on Trump's servers, and how certain media outlets got advance notice about certain investigations and conspiracy theories. But back to Tucker. This is a pretty big claim. Pretty big claim to say that the National Security Agency is investigating him for political purposes, and furthermore to get him off the air, to kind of take him off the board as a political asset for the right. Pretty big claim, which requires pretty big evidence. We're kind of inclined to trust Tucker's claim here, though, but he's so far been unable to prove with hard evidence to back up his allegation. But that's kind of gonna be par for the course with when you're dealing with something like the National Security Agency. They're basically like the most secretive organization in the world, and it's inherently difficult to get solid evidence that they're doing something. It's kind of in their nature that they don't have solid evidence of them doing anything. But to the extent that Tucker could get proof that the NSA was spying on him, he may have done just that just one night later on Tuesday. Here is that clip.
On Sunday, we heard from a whistleblower within the U.S. government, someone with direct knowledge, who warned us that the NSA was reading our electronic communications, our emails and texts, and was planning to leak them selectively in an effort to hurt us. This person had details from my emails that no one outside the recipient could have known. So it was not a delusion, it was entirely real. In fact, it was confirmed. After the show last night, after we announced this, other news organizations acted as if it's totally normal for heavily politicized intel agencies to spy on and threaten journalists they disagree with. It's no big deal. Stop whining. But it is a big deal. It is completely wrong, not to mention illegally. And this is hardly the first time the so-called intelligence community has done something like this. They've done an awful lot of it. Look it up. If we let them continue to do it, it's the end of democracy. Democracy can't function with semi-independent, highly politicized intel agencies. It's really dangerous. For its part, the Biden administration just ignored the story. They did not deny the story. They can't. They know that it's true. Today, the president's flak was asked about it on Air Force One. Here's the exchange.
Tucker Carlson said that the NSA is spying on him. Is the administration aware of any espionage or listening efforts on U.S. citizens by the NSA, and is Tucker Carlson one of them?
Well, the NSA, as I think you're well aware, I'm sure everyone's aware, everyone on this plane is aware, I should say, is an entity that focuses on foreign threats and individuals who are attempting to do us harm on foreign soil. So that is their purview, but beyond that, I would point you to the intelligence community.
It's just like, hey, are you guys aware of the NSA spying on Tucker? Well, as you know, the NSA is an organization, and they do things in an organized fashion. And anything more than that, I would direct you towards them.
I think your implication was that by not addressing it, but explaining what the NSA does, the implication was that Tucker is a threat from foreign soil.
Yes, I believe that is accurate. I think that was kind of what she was implying there is like, well, the NSA, they only spy on foreign adversaries. So, if you're, I'm not saying Tucker's a foreign adversary. You're saying Tucker's a foreign adversary.
Yeah. All I'm saying is Russian spy. Moving on.
Yes.
It's like she's reading the Wikipedia entry. Ask them. But here's what to notice. No denial. Of course, she's right that the NSA is chartered to spy on foreigners, not on Americans. That's illegal. And yet the NSA does routinely spy on Americans. It won't call it spying. That's exactly what it is. Millions of Americans. And sometimes it does it for political reasons. And everyone knows this. Everyone, including sitting members of the Intel Committee. Some of them are paranoid about their own communications. That's true. In Washington, this is just considered fine. But it's not fine. It is dangerous and it's wrong. Some faceless hack in a powerful government spy agency decides he doesn't like what you think, so he's going to hurt you, and there's nothing you can do about it? That could happen to you. And when it does happen, trust us. NBC News will call you a delusional QAnon conspiracy theorist for complaining about it. Well, this morning we decided to just call Paul Nakasone directly. He's the highly political left-wing four-star general who runs the NSA. The receptionist refused to put us through. We're American citizens, though, so we kept trying, because it's our right. This afternoon, we got his direct line, and we tried again. Nakasone's assistant seemed shocked that someone whose email the NSA is reading would dare to call the director himself. Shut up, Surf, obey! So they told us Nakasone just wasn't there. Then, just minutes before air tonight, the NSA sent us an infuriatingly dishonest formal statement, an entire paragraph of lies written purely for the benefit of the Intel community's lackeys at CNN and MSNBC, all those people they hire with the titles on the screen. They also tweeted it out a few minutes ago. Now, last night on the show, we made a very straightforward claim. NSA has read my private emails without my permission, period. That's what we said. Tonight's statement from the NSA does not deny that. Instead, it comes with this non sequitur. In part, quote, Tucker Carlson has never been an intelligence target of the agency. Okay, glad to know. But the question remains, did the Biden administration read my personal emails? That's the question that we asked directly to NSA officials when we spoke to them about 20 minutes ago in a very heated conversation. Did you read my emails? And again, they refused to say. Again and again. And then they refused even to explain why they couldn't answer that simple question. We can't tell you, and we won't tell you why we can't tell you. My emails. And the message was clear. We can do whatever we want. We can read your personal texts. We can read your personal emails. We can send veiled threats your way to brush you back if we don't like your politics. We can do anything. We're our own country. And there's literally nothing you can do about it. We're in charge. You're not. Orwellian does not begin to describe the experience. It was like living in China. But
I'll mind you again, that's another example of the NSA, the government claiming the right against unreasonable search and seizure against Tucker Carlson.
Yeah, like when they demand information, when the government demands information of us, we have no option to say, no, we don't feel like it.
Sometimes they don't even demand. They'll just take it without asking.
Yeah.
They don't even give the benefit of implying that they'll take it.
It was like living in China. But we should get used to it. Now that the Biden administration has classified tens of millions of patriotic Americans, the kind who served in the military and fly flags in front of their homes, as potential domestic terrorists, white supremacist saboteurs, we're going to see a whole lot more of this kind of thing.
All right, so brass pair on Tucker to call the NSA.
Yeah, I appreciate that.
That was the best part. Is like, you know, the NSA was so shocked that, you know, somebody who they were reading their emails would call them and ask them about it. How dare they?
How dare you?
Let's see here. So what I got up on the screen right now is the official statement that the NSA sent to Tucker and then also tweeted out, because that is the modern era that we live in 2021, is the National Security Agency that used to not exist now makes public statements on Twitter. So their statement reads, on June 28th, 2021, Tucker Carlson alleged that the National Security Agency has been, quote, monitoring our electronic communications and is planning to leak them in an attempt to take this show off the air. This allegation is untrue. Tucker Carlson has never been an intelligence target of the agency, and the NSA has never had any plans to try to take his program off the air. NSA has a foreign intelligence mission. We target foreign powers to generate insights on foreign activities that could harm the United States. With limited exceptions, example, in an emergency, the NSA may not target a U.S. citizen without a court order that explicitly authorizes the targeting. So, we would never target a U.S. citizen. We literally can't unless there's an emergency that we get to decide if it's an emergency or not.
Yeah. And so, the court that would do the warrant would be, secret, so we'd know about it either.
So putting this in the context of some things that we know about Snowden, or about the NSA, is things that we know from Snowden. What Snowden released, at the last decade, early in the last decade, about what the NSA has the capability of doing. And essentially, the only thing, the tools that the NSA has are so easy and available to use for the agents that they essentially have the equivalent of a Google onto all of your private data all over the place. And what Snowden, the things that he released, it wasn't just speculation or conspiracy. Like, Snowden released actual evidence of these kinds of programs existing and the ease with which they are able to be used. And also, one of the biggest reasons why he actually leaked that information, one of the biggest motivating factors for him, was that the NSA was supposed to build into the software the laws and regulations and constitutionality of them, that they were supposed to have, to the extent that they were going to be monitoring or picking up intel or data transfers from American citizens, the program was supposed to process that internally and not reveal that to any of the NSA agents. Now, I think that still gets a little fuzzy because I think that the program itself represents the government, and so the program itself shouldn't be able to look at them either. But that gets a little too much into the weeds. But the reason why Snowden released this information is because the NSA made a conscious decision to not include those safeguards into the program. They consciously did not want the program to be able to hide that information from them. So the NSA doesn't need to launch a formal inquiry into anybody. They can just, any of their agents can go use the software. And
Snowden also demonstrated that in actuality, the programs were being used to monitor American citizens, despite them saying that's not what it was meant for. That he showed a bunch of solid examples of it being used to monitor Americans. So if that's what one person was able to observe and provide evidence of, I'm sure it's widespread.
Yeah, I mean, Snowden himself admitted that he actually used some of that software inappropriately as well to look at one of his friends and one of his family members, and he admitted to regretting having done that. But he said it was just an easy thing and everybody did it. That was the culture at the NSA. So I said before we watched that second segment that Tucker, to the extent that Tucker was able to gather evidence that the NSA really was spying on him and provide that to us. Obviously, he said that he had evidence himself, but he wasn't able to share that on air. But to the extent that he had evidence that he could share on air, Dyer, how often does the NSA comment publicly that they are not investigating somebody?
I don't remember any time before this that they've made a public statement like this about not investigating someone, which to me just makes me think, because their job is to be liars, right?
Yes. Yeah, is anybody looking at like a public statement from the NSA and saying, "Oh yeah, that's trustworthy"?
Yeah, their whole shtick is lying to people, cloak and dagger.
No, there's been a bunch of dissecting of this paragraph that they sent out, and the way the kind of looking at it word by word and kind of parsing where the commas are, where they're not, and all this stuff, and saying, okay, here's the evidence that the NSA's kind of got a double speak in this paragraph. We're not going to do that tonight. To some extent, that's a little bit silly. To some extent, it's obvious. And there's enough other examples on YouTube and congressmen and on cable news of people dissecting this paragraph to death. So if you guys want to see that, go somewhere else.
It's also based on the premise that they have to be honest.
Right?
They're not.
Yes. Exactly.
So like, it doesn't matter what they said. It doesn't have to be some sort of cryptic, special wording where they're trying to hide the truth. They are not required, because no one's going to hold them accountable, and the government's not going to punish them for lying.
Yeah.
So yeah, it doesn't matter.
So, I guess we'll see what comes of this. Tucker's right though. It might seem a little silly, or maybe a conflict of interest for Republican congressmen to be calling for House investigations into the NSA over the concerns of a conservative commentator. But what Tucker said is very correct, is that if they're doing it to him, they can do it to you. As Dyer said earlier, and this is proven, this is like absolutely fact-checked true multiple ways, that during the Obama administration, they had I think it was a CNBC journalist, where they uploaded classified documents to her computer in an attempt to frame her for stealing classified documents. And they ended up getting that figured out, thank God. But they could very easily do that to any one of us. Look at the types of things that they're doing to the January 6th people. People who were just in D.C. that day. Somehow the FBI was able to find them almost immediately wherever they were in the country, even if they were just barely in D.C. that day.
Or looked like someone.
Or looked like somebody. We know at the end of the Obama administration, he removed the firewalls between the intelligence agencies and allowed them to share intelligence and resources together. If you think the FBI is not using NSA tools, or what's more likely to happen is that the NSA might want information about a U.S. citizen, and so they'll just say, hey, FBI, you're allowed to investigate U.S. citizens, and hey, we have all these fancy tools that can investigate U.S. citizens that we're just not allowed to use. So why don't you, the FBI, do that for us, and then you can just share that intelligence right back to us. That would, as it stands right now, that is perfectly, quote-unquote, legal, not constitutional, but it's legal for them to be able to do that. I don't... And to think that they're not doing that. They're not doing that. So somebody on YouTube says, pinky promise we're not spying. Yeah, if you want to believe the NSA's pinky promise, I would check to see if you still have your pinky.
You can't break a pinky promise. That's scientific. You know, I'll bet you, though, $10 that the story that Tucker and his team were working on was the Hunter Biden laptop story. What do you think?
It could be. No, I think it's the FBI story. I think that's what it was. I bet you Tucker's got more information on that FBI story, planning January 6th and all the involvement the FBI had with that day, and false flagging it. I hope that that's what Tucker was working on.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah, and I hope that's what got in the NSA's craw.
Or possibly transition.
Excuse me?
Let's just make more overt. I'll try to provide you a transition.
I don't understand you sometimes. All right, so our next story is about Hunter Biden's laptop, as Dyer just alluded to.
Thanks.
So this is a pretty interesting story, and Dyer didn't know most of this, and there's actually a little bit more that you're going to find out during this article. So you guys will all be excited to watch as Dyer loses his mind at how absurd this story is, because it's a doozy.
I'm glad you checked whether or not I knew the story before you started talking to me about it, because I love to be surprised by this stuff live on air.
Yeah. Okay. So there was a... Get out of here. So you guys remember the Hunter Biden laptop story, right? Unless you were only on Twitter when this broke. It was actually such a big deal that Twitter broke its own terms of service and locked out the New York Post, one of the oldest newspapers in the country, saying that they were no longer allowed to post any news article to Twitter because of this story. And they actually suppressed it so much right before the election because it was obviously very damning for Joe. And after the election, there was a poll where people were told about this laptop story, and it was significant enough that it is believed to have shifted the vote. That had this story been allowed to propagate before voting day, that quite possibly Joe Biden would not have won. Or at the very least, that F curve on the vote count would have had to have been a lot steeper.
Yes, that unexplained highest number of votes ever in history for the most boring, unpopular candidate.
Yeah.
Would have been a little hard to achieve.
All right, so tonight we're going to just, because the story's a little complicated and the New York Post did such a good job collecting it all and putting it into a nice, concise package, we're just going to read the article and respond to it. So, article from the New York Post, laptop shows Joe Biden attended meeting between Hunter and his Mexican business partners. Oh, boy. All right, so at some point, the New York Post starts off, at some point, the Biden White House will have to confront evidence of the president's involvement in his son Hunter's shady overseas business dealings. Joe Biden insists that he never knew a thing about Hunter's lucrative deals in countries where he wielded influence as the vice president. But evidence abounds on Hunter's abandoned laptop of Joe's involvement.
For instance, Joe invited Hunter's foreign associates to breakfast meetings at his vice presidential residence and to his office in the White House. The laptop shows he took his son on Air Force Two to countries where Hunter was doing deals, and on at least one occasion included one of Hunter's business partners on the trip. Among more than 100 events scheduled in Hunter's diary at the VP's residence at the Naval Observatory in Washington, D.C., there are meetings which appear to overlap with Hunter's business interests. Quotations. Breakfast with Dad, Nav Obis. In which is one such meeting recorded at 8:30 a.m. on November 9th, 2015. 5 photographs date stamped on that day and taken at 10:03 a.m. and 10:04 a.m. appear on the laptop, showing Joe posing with 4 of Hunter's business associates, including Mexican billionaire Carlos Slim and Miguel Aleman.
Yeah, so to clarify, so what that's saying is that Hunter's laptop calendar showed an entry that he was having breakfast with Dad at Nav Obs, which is the Naval Observatory, which is where the vice president lives at. And then also on that laptop, coinciding with that calendar entry, are also a bunch of pictures with the exact same date stamp and date and time stamp as that entry. And you can see here there's pictures of Joe and Hunter, and these are all been identified as Mexican billionaires and businessmen that Hunter has been doing deals with. There's a lot more in the story going into emails.
It was so nice of them to so well document their corruption.
Yes. All right, so one of the photos features Velsko's son, Miguel Almani Magnani. So there's going to be a lot of weird names in this. I would encourage you guys to go read this on your own so you can kind of piece together the names. It's not so much important that you remember who's related to who in this, but just that there's a lot of shady Mexican energy business deals going on here that are very tied into the Mexican government and then are also meeting with Joe Biden and Hunter Biden on the side here. Okay, so one of the photos features Velsko's son, Miguel Almani Magnani, the founder of budget airline Inkjet, at whose Acapulco mansion Hunter and wife Kathleen had stayed at that March. Jeff Cooper, a longtime Biden family benefactor who ran one of the largest asbestos litigation firms in the country, Illinois-based Simmons Cooper, also appeared along with Hunter. The photos were taken in the living room of the VP's residence, which was painted at the time in a dandelion yellow. I'm going to go with dandelion yellow.
Yes,
chosen by Jill Biden, and featured distinctive paintings by Vermont artist Wolf Kahn. on loan from the Addison Ripley Fine Art in Georgetown. Wow. What great taste in art they have, which are visible on the walls behind the men in the picture. The two floral chairs and a pink-toned silk rug in the photos match the decor of the living room at the time. In the background of one of the photos, a piano and family photographs can be seen in the front bay window. So basically, they're just going through that. All of the stuff in the background of the picture confirms that, yes, this was indeed taken at the vice president's residence, that these photos, these people were in the vice president's house while Joe Biden was the vice president in 2015. Let's see here. So it continues that Slim was in town that day. So they're identifying some of the people that were in this picture. Politico has an article that says that they spotted Carlos Slim in the lobby yesterday morning at the Georgetown Four Seasons. So there is additional confirmation that these people were, that they actually were in town that day. So New York Post doing a great job of making sure all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed, all of the evidence from multiple sources all aligns to the exact same story, that these Mexican businessmen, at the request of Hunter Biden, were in Joe Biden's house while he was the vice president in 2015, and they were all actually in town that day. So great legwork, New York Post. Really good job here.
Impressive. Cooper and Hunter had been working on energy deals in Mexico and elsewhere in Latin America. A 2013 email from Cooper demonstrates their high expectations of the association with the Alman dynasty. In quotations, Miguel wants us to go to Mexico City, he wrote to Hunter on February 26. This is setting up to be flipping gigantic, brother. At the time, President Enrique Pena Nieto was reforming Mexico's energy market to allow private capital investment in state-owned oil and gas monopoly, Petróleos Mexicanos. So that was just demonstrating that it was the son of Alman was excited about the prospects of working with Hunter, right?
Yes. And this is so the part about the Mexican president Enrique, he is at this time working to reform how Mexico acquires energy. Obviously, that is a opportunity for anybody in the Mexican energy sector. Let's see here. So Cooper's association with the Bidens began in 2005 when he started filing multi-million-dollar lawsuits in Delaware in association with Joe Biden's late son, Beau Biden. Beau Biden's firm, Bilferretto, Giglietto, and Biden. Wow, what a set of names there. He would make a lot of money from the $30 billion asbestos compensation business, helped by Joe as a leader of the powerful Judiciary Committee, blocking asbestos litigation reform when a bill reached the Senate floor, as Paul Sperry and Real Clear Investigations has reported. So I'm not super familiar with that story, but essentially, obviously, you guys know asbestos is like a big thing, and like, you know, were you working with asbestos 30 years ago and all that stuff? There's a bunch of government regulations that have come out in the last few decades that kind of govern that, and there was a lot of money to be made in obviously litigating about that. And a lot of that litigation is governed by certain laws that have been passed in the last few decades. What this story seems to be about is that people close to Joe Biden, his son and his brother, seem to be making an awful lot of money off of the way the asbestos litigations were currently set up, and Joe Biden was blocking laws on the Senate floor that would have changed that, ostensibly would have made it so that it was less profitable for his family members. So obviously clear conflict of interest. And the reason why that story is being brought up here is because some of the key players from that corruption gambit are also in this story, because Joe Biden, his entire history of being in government is just a web of corruption that is all linked together. So that's why this is being brought up as kind of an aside here, just to kind of clarify for you guys. When Joe Biden became vice president, Cooper put Hunter on the board of his venture capital firm El Guardio Global, and gave him shares in the business, which netted Hunter around $80,000 per year, a document on the laptop shows. In 2015, Hunter also received a, quote, one-time payment of $300,000 from Eudora. Eudora? Yeah, there we go. Eudora.
So Simmons Cooper also put up $1 million in investment capital for Hunter and his uncle Jim Biden's abortive attempt to run a hedge fund in 2009. When the venture ended, apparently early, the Bidens returned the money. Cooper joined the VP's entourage and on Air Force Two to Mexico in 2016 when he and Hunter were trying to negotiate an ill-fated petroleum deal with Alman Magnani.
Dyer, is it appropriate for Air Force Two to be utilized as a business jet?
It's actually expressly a crime for you to be to do that.
Okay. I didn't realize that. Maybe Joe didn't know either.
Well, working for the federal government and on their facilities, you cannot be using their resources to personally enrich yourself in any possible way, which is kind of like been what Biden does. His entire family just has constantly been enriching themselves by using government assets and government time and influence.
Yeah. Okay, so basically to give you guys kind of the summary of the story so far, it set up that these Mexican oil barons, they have a pre-existing connection with Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, so much so that they were invited to have breakfast at the vice president's mansion in 2015. Now we're talking about in 2016, in February of 2016, which Joe Biden's still vice president in February 2016, about a trip on Air Force Two that included obviously Joe Biden, because that's his plane, Air Force Two, and Hunter Biden, who's not the vice president, and one of Hunter Biden's business partners, Cooper. They're both on Air Force Two going to Mexico in February of 2016 when Joe Biden is still president, and they're both going to Mexico on Air Force Two with the intention of engaging with these previously mentioned Mexican oil barons to set up a business deal. So just to make sure everybody's on the same page here. So this is where the story gets interesting. So at 6 p.m. on February 24th, 2016, about an hour after Wheels Up from Joint Base Andrews on the 5-hour flight to Mexico City, Hunter wrote a plaintive email to Alman Magnani using Air Force Two's secure high-speed satellite communications channel. He blind copied Cooper. So they didn't do the best job of explaining this. They kind of will in a second here, but just to kind of make sure everybody's on the same page again. So it's public record where and when Air Force Two is taking off, right? Maybe not before it takes off, but after it takes off, that's all public record. So what happened here is that New York Post probably would have FOIA'd what the schedule was, and they would have seen what time was Wheels Up, what time was takeoff for Air Force Two. And then matching that up with the time that the email was sent on the laptop, they know that email was sent while they were in the air. When you're in the air on Air Force Two, the only possible way to send something over the internet is to use Air Force Two's secure high-speed satellite communications link, which is a military communications channel.
Which means this email is actually a government document.
Yes, it does. I wonder what other documents Hunter Biden sent that have become government documents. So this is a pretty big deal. Again, like I said, the setup is that Joe Biden flying to Mexico, flying his son's business partner, flying them to Mexico on government property to engage in a business deal that had wheels greased by having breakfast at the vice president's mansion. And then furthermore, Hunter's using secure government military channels to send off emails. And just wait until you see what this email says, because it's a whopper. It is a whopper of an email. Let's see here. So the email begins, quote, "We are arriving late on Air Force Two to Mexico City. I'm attending a meeting with President Nieto." So this is Hunter Biden sending us an email. So Hunter Biden is saying that he is going to actually attend a meeting with the Mexican president and his dad. So I'm attending a meeting with President Nieto and Dad. I would love to see you, and he's sending this to one of those oil barons. Would love to see you, but you never responded. I am really upset by it. This is Hunter Biden speaking. I want you at the plane when the VP lands with your mom and dad, and you completely ignored me. I've looked at what your family has done and want to follow in that tradition, presumably a tradition of corruption. We have been talking business deals for 7 years, and I really appreciate you letting me stay at your villa resort, or your resort villa. But I have brought every single person you have ever asked me. Let me try and read this correctly. So this is Hunter Biden speaking. But I have brought every single person you have ever asked me to bring to the effing White House and the vice president's house and the inauguration, and then you go completely silent. You make me feel like I've done something to offend you. Hunter had been useful to al-Magnani, apart from the 3 tickets to the Obama-Biden inauguration ball in 2013 and meetings with his dad. So this is an email. Hunter Biden is, when he typed this, he was on Air Force 2, government property. He sent this over a secure communications military channel. And this email is detailing quid pro quo. Yeah, I used my father, because how else is Hunter going to be getting people to visit at the White House? How else is he going to get people to visit at the vice president's house? How else is he going to get them tickets to the inauguration ball? Well, he's going to leverage Joe Biden. And obviously Joe Biden's in on it. We know that from the previous part of the story, that Joe Biden invited this group to have breakfast with him at his house, at his vice president's house in 2015, a year before this email sent over a government secure network. This is nuts. This is nuts. Dyer, is this nuts?
It's nuts, but like it's not like you can use the excuse of, oh, we're bringing family friends. No, these are clearly business associates, and he's saying, that, hey, I gave you all these things, work with me, right?
Exactly. This is, I gave you the quid, now I need the pro quo, and you're ghosting me, and I'm offended.
It's also so pathetic, by the way. It's like he's the girlfriend who's way too clingy, right?
Yeah. Like, God, I cleaned the apartment, I got you beers, I did all this stuff for you, and you just left me. Yeah, no, so this is really bombshell. And nobody's talking about it, so nobody's talking about it except for on the right, because the Bidens can do no wrong. Because this pulls in a lot of people, right? This pulls in really causes Biden some problems. This pulls in some problems with Obama. Obviously, I would imagine that other people knew that this stuff was going on. But again, just to be as clear as we possibly can here, this very, for as much information as in this article, this is a pretty short article. This article set up that Joe Biden personally had a pre-existing relationship with these oil magnates in Mexico. They were introduced by Hunter Biden. Hunter Biden was attempting to engage in business deals with them, these high-power business deals, and being able to and get into the Mexican oil business as right around the time Mexico was changing their oil policy. Less than a year later, Hunter Biden is on Air Force 2 with the vice president, with one of his business partners. They're flying to Mexico with the express purpose of meeting with the Mexican president. And Hunter Biden sends an email to the other Mexican business tycoons saying, hey, I leveraged my father's position as the vice president to get you all of these things that you want. Now I want you to engage in business deal with me, because that was the deal. That was the deal. I get you access to the White House. You give me money, and you're not doing that. And yeah, Joe Biden, there's no, I mean, maybe Joe Biden today, this could all go on around him and he wouldn't notice. But for all the things that Joe Biden was, he was sharp at being as corrupt as possible before about 2 years ago. He's probably a little soft in the brain right now. But Joe Biden was a sharp guy. Now, he was an idiot about just about everything policy-wise, but he was sharp at being able to separate fools from their money and making sure that he was getting that money to him and his family. He was very, very good at figuring that out, and he was very clever at doing that. So clever, in fact, that he got away with it for 50 years. Alrighty. So.
I also think it's funny that during that time period where he was working with that company, it's the Petros Mexicanos, whatever it was. That company was indicted between 2009 and 2015 of working with the cartels. So, like, I just pulled up an article on it too. So that's funny. So Hunter has been useful to the Alman Magnani, apart from the 3 tickets to the Obama-Biden inauguration ball of 2013.
Yeah, basically what that sentence is saying is that it was public knowledge that they got them those tickets for the inauguration ball, but it wasn't public knowledge that they were able to have breakfast with Joe Biden and to be able to have visits to the White House.
Crucially, for a Mexican airline owner wanting to spread his wings, Hunter also set up 2 meetings with Alman Magnani with Secretary of Transportation Anthony Fox on March 17, 2014 and January 23, 2015. And a separate meeting with the administrator of the Federal Aviation Authority emails on the laptop showed.
Yeah, so this Magnani guy is an airline executive, a Mexican airline executive, essentially, and but Hunter is able to somehow get him. I mean, that's a big deal for a Mexican airline CEO, is to get a meeting with the U.S. Federal Aviation Authority and the U.S. Transportation Authority. That's a pretty big deal. And, you know, did Hunter get them those deals because Hunter's a great lobbyist? No, Hunter got them those deals because he told his dad to go make those people have meetings with his friends. Like, there's no other way there's no other way to read that. There's not a chance that if a random crackhead off the street, because Hunter Biden is a crackhead, there's not a chance that a crackhead off the street goes to the Secretary of Transportation and says, hey, I want you to meet with one of my friends. So you're going to tell him to fuck off. But if that crackhead's dad is the vice president, then the vice president goes and says, hey man, come on, man. You gotta go meet with my son's friend, man. Come on, man.
You dog-faced pony soldier?
Yeah. So when so that's some this is pretty obvious quid pro quo here. There's some issues here. So when Cooper back to the old business partner they had, when Cooper asked if he would go to the first Fox meeting, Hunter replied, no, but I'm calling Secretary Fox to let him know, because Secretary Fox would be really concerned about a regular crackhead being buddies with somebody that he was meeting for. No, Hunter was saying, hey, it's me, Hunter. I'm friends with this guy, and I'm also the son of the vice president, the guy who could control whether or not you're still in that position. So this was kind of almost a veiled threat of, this person that you're meeting with has the stamp of approval from the vice president, so you really don't have a choice but to meet with him. Before the second meeting, Hunter emailed Fox's director of scheduling and advance, Laura DeCastro, quote, Miguel Alman, Interjet chairman, is a close family friend, but I have no business with the company. Jeez.
Yeah.
I bet he doesn't. I bet he doesn't.
So, Burisma, the corrupt Ukrainian energy company that was paying Hunter $83,000 just to sit on a board and do nothing on an energy company where he knows nothing about energy and doesn't speak the language. Yeah, that Burisma. It was also involved in his Mexican business dealings. In a 2014 email, Cooper wrote to Hunter, I met with Miguel Alman Magnani last night. He has set up meetings with the Secretary of Energy and the CEO of Pemex, which is the Mexican oil company, for Jan 12th. Is there any chance that anyone from Burisma could attend? Oh, wow.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. So it's all connected. So Hunter later asked Alman Magnati to intervene with the Mexican government to smooth out a visa problem with Burisma's owner, Nikolai. I can't say that name.
Zlochevsky.
Thank you for the save. Alman Magnati does not appear to have assisted.
I am just really blown away with New York Post here. They've done a very good job of being able to string this all together from multiple sources to corroborate each other. I'm starting to understand why, when the FBI raided Rudy Giuliani's apartment, why they were not interested at all in Hunter Biden's laptop.
Too much trouble.
Yeah. The Post here has done some fantastic connections here, pulling in from a lot of other places. So let's see here. So as a result, Zlochevsky could not fly to Mexico to finalize the deal with Cooper because he's a criminal that Cooper had brokered with Pemex, thus jeopardizing one of Hunter's most profitable side hustles. Oh, the poor guy. Quote, going to have to do some serious backpedaling with Burisma, Hunter emailed Cooper on February 16th, 2015. Quote, most likely jeopardizes my board position. I am shocked Miguel did not come through in a crunch time, replied Cooper. Quote, they clearly value the relationship with your family, and they know they could sustain serious damage here by making enemies with you. Maybe a call from your dad to his dad, maybe that shakes things loose. What do you think? So,
oh jeez,
here you've got
fucking hell.
Here you've got Cooper. They're talking about the Burisma deals, which that was the whole thing last year around election time. Was this whole Burisma thing? This is the whole thing. Like, this is the entire Trump impeachment thing. Was that Trump was saying, hey, something weird about Biden and Hunter going on with Burisma. I think Biden knew something, and just asking the question got everybody in such a tuffle that they went and impeached him. I mean, that's a really big reaction to something that's not true. That's something Trump apparently just made up. But we have in this email here an admission, Cooper saying, well, Burisma really values the relationship with your family. And they know that they could sustain some serious damage by making enemies with Hunter Biden's family. Well, what would the serious damage be? Well, we saw what the benefit was. The benefit was that Joe Biden said that you're not getting the $1 billion unless you fire the prosecutor. And by God, they fired the prosecutor. So that's what it looked like when they were on their good side. But making enemies, well, I'm sure if Joe Biden has the ability to get Ukraine to fire a prosecutor to stop going after Burisma, I imagine that if Burisma made Joe Biden angry, he probably had the power to really mess up their day. And then you've got here, okay, so this whole part here, let me see here. Make sure we're highlighting the right part here. Okay, yeah, there we go. I'll make sure I'm showing this on the screen. Okay, so going to have to do some serious backpedaling with Burisma, Hunter emailed Cooper on February 15th. Then Cooper responds, skipping down to the bottom here, maybe a call from your dad, maybe a call from Joe Biden to Burisma's dad, I guess. Maybe that shakes some things loose. Or no, that would be a call back to this Miguel guy. So Hunter is trying to broker a deal with Burisma and Miguel from Mexico. And then Cooper says, why don't you, to try and get this deal to go through, why don't you get Joe Biden, your dad, to call Miguel's dad, and then maybe that will get the Burisma deal to go through. So that seems to be pretty clear cut that it was, now we don't have evidence that phone call ever happened, but certainly these guys thought that Joe Biden would be party to that. Certainly they thought that he'd be interested in helping grease those wheels.
Yeah. No reply was found on the laptop, but Hunter knows that his arrival with his dad on Air Force Two the following year will demonstrate his clout to the prospective Mexican business partners. nothing shakes things loose abroad quite so profitably as jetting in on the White House bird, huh?
Yeah. So again, just to re-clarify that, Hunter brokering a deal with Burisma and Mexican energy tycoons. It started to fall through. Hunter's advised by his other business partner, Cooper, hey, maybe if Joe Biden called them, maybe he could get that deal to go through with Burisma. What do you think? Hunter Biden does not respond to that email, this email in 2015. But a year later, Hunter Biden and Cooper find themselves on Air Force Two, along with Joe Biden, flying to Mexico, where Hunter says he's going to meet directly with the president of Mexico. And Hunter's emailing this Miguel guy, hey, I got you all of these cool things and all of this access to the White House, all of this access to the vice presidency. I expect you to come here and meet us so you can meet with me and my dad on the tarmac in Mexico. So there's no email to respond to that, but there's certainly some flight logs.
Yeah. So there's a lot of detail, from a lot of different sources here, and it's crazy how much evidence of clear quid pro quo here, as well as we have Biden's own statement on video about Burisma, right? And yet this is not worthy of investigation, but they are willing to investigate Trump on what was literally nothing.
Well, no, they were investigating Trump on asking a question about this. Trump was pulling on such a small thread. He said, hey, there's something weird about what Biden was doing in Ukraine during his vice presidency last term. I wonder what was going on there. And Trump just very slightly tickled that string. And they were so scared that he'd pull on that string and that all of this stuff would come out, that they had to impeach him over that. Can you imagine if we had some of these emails back during impeachment 2 years ago? Trump would be president right now.
Can you imagine having honest politicians?
I cannot.
I can't.
Let's see here. Let's try to see if I can pull up that.
Margaret Warner, I see you with the microphone.
Thank you. Hello, Mr. Vice
Hey,
President.
Margaret, good to
How are
see you.
My question is, should we actually be going on offense in the information war, in the cyber?
And most of what happens in the cyberspace is being able to come forward.
I was hoping that was the clip that
Nope.
No, YouTube, they're trying to hide that clip. They showed me the wrong one. But yeah, you guys remember that clip of Joe Biden talking about firing the Ukrainian prosecutor, and he went and told the Ukrainian president, if we've got $1 billion of aid for you from the U.S. taxpayer, and if you want that $1 billion, you're going to fire this prosecutor. If you don't fire that prosecutor, you're not getting the $1 billion. And son of a bitch, they fired the prosecutor.
Yep.
Alrighty.
Next story.
Next story. This one's a doozy.
Oh, look. Oh, God. So many roads. That's so racist.
Well, this got a KKK hood on it, but...
No, it's the road. The hood's fine.
All right. So you guys might not know this because you're bigots, but highways are racist.
What?
Wait, like, are highways racist or are highways
Sometimes you hear
racist?
folks say, well, look, we tried.
Like, are the highways themselves, like, purveyors of racism? Can they be retrained, or, like, is it just, like, the structure itself is racism?
It is both an avatar of racism and also it is racist. So presumably out there somewhere, a road is committing a hate crime.
Interesting. Now, let's before we get too far into this, let's try and not be insane people. And why don't we show the audience what we're talking about?
Oh, okay. We can try that.
We tried to find a black-owned.
Okay, so this is a Transportation Secretary Buttigieg.
Sometimes you hear
talking
folks say,
about
well,
highways.
look, we tried. We tried to find a black-owned business to bid on this project, but they just weren't out there. Well, if that's actually true.
And they have the numbers in unemployment that are historically lower than white America.
I can't really navigate.
Where do you
video
see these
diary.
dollars for?
There we go. You always send me difficult to navigate videos.
In the American
And
job.
the interstate system was built to keep certain groups in and certain groups out. So it was built on a racist system, correct?
Yeah, often this wasn't just an act of neglect. Often this was a conscious choice. There is racism physically built into some of our highways. And that's why the jobs plan has dollars specifically committed to reconnect some of the communities that were divided by these dollars. So there's intention about that. So that's part one, right? Making sure the dollars.
So, wow, that's there's racism built physically into the structure. Is this the structural racism they keep talking about?
Yes, they meant it's in the cement.
Now, Dyer, correct me if I'm wrong here, but aren't highways considered infrastructure?
Yes, as is racism now.
Now, doesn't that mean that infrastructure is racist?
Yes.
So why do the Democrats want to spend $6 trillion on racism?
They want $6 trillion worth of racism.
That's incredible. It's a lot of racism.
I mean, they did, slavery and Jim Crow and all that shit. So they are the party of KKK.
Yes, they are. So the Democrats claim that the highways were used to, quote, sometimes intentionally segregate thriving black communities. They provide no references or evidence of this whatsoever.
I'll cross a bunch of articles, by the way.
Dyer literally went insane today. He spent a absurd amount of time on this segment because it was driving him crazy. He could not find any evidence that now, is it possible that they just decided we're going to bulldoze a black community to build this highway? Yes, it's possible, but there's no statistics or data on that. All of this is being said without any kind of evidence presented whatsoever. And
I approached it open-mindedly. I really was trying to find any kind of reference to what they're talking about, but none of the articles referenced anything. So I had to look on my own, and there was no data supporting this.
Yes, and actually, as we know, the mere allegation of racism is evidence of racism, and questioning any racism makes you yourself a racist. So by asking questions and looking for evidence, Dyer suddenly became racist, just like the highways. Let's see here. So they provided no references to the highways being literally built out of racism. I didn't know racism was a resource. It was like a structural element. Is it a strong structural element? How does it compare to lumber? Since lumber,
it survived several thousand years. So it must be pretty strong.
Yeah, I mean, lumber is pretty expensive, and I'm trying to remodel the new house I just bought. So I'm wondering, is racism cheaper? What's the structural strength compared to lumber? Anyways. They attempted to say that the highways were going through communities of color was an extension of Jim Crow style racist zoning laws. There is no evidence that was the intent of the highway planners, nor is there evidence that they would be the effect of building highways through a community. This is critical race theory expanded out to the roads. They took a current outcome that was created by a litany of factors and contributed it to racism alone. So again, we've talked about this on the show before, but today in what was it, the 3rd, July 3rd, actually this is July 4th. Hey, happy 4th of July, everybody. Today on July 4th, 2021, if you are poor, the most likely cause of you being poor, or if you're rich, whatever your income level is, the most likely cause of your income level is likely a result of the 2008 crash or the 2000 .com bubble, or maybe as far back as the stagflation and economic crisis of the 80s. Because those events were so severe, and possibly even today, but COVID would count as well. Certainly that's going to be a big thing moving on forward into the future. Those events had such a absurdly impactful economic effect that really going any further back than those is just not practical. It's highly likely that you can trace your current financial situation to one of those events. Trying to say that if a black family is poor today, that has something to do with something that happened 100 years ago, and has nothing to do with the absurd Democrat leftist policies that led to the dot-com bubble, that led to the financial collapse, that led to the COVID lockdowns, that them being poor today has nothing to do with those things. It's just not accurate.
Those big economic crises, including the Great Great Depression rather, they knocked people down to the base level of poverty, and from that point, like, you have the same opportunity as someone else who may have had historical poverty, but now you have the same level as everyone else.
Yeah, some people rose, some people dropped, but it was a shakeup. And certainly the ones that happened post-'80s, post-civil rights, I mean, everybody was as likely as anyone else to be shaken up or down.
Yeah. So the planners, just getting back to these highways being racist, the planners that made the highway system in the 1920s could not have known that their highway system would develop into the 10-lane superhighways, bumper-to-bumper traffic that we have today. The highway size and the density of the community that the highways are in is entirely due to the last 100 years of management of those cities, particularly the management we're talking about in these big cities with lots of poverty and crime and lack of jobs, high unemployment. These are Democrat cities, and there's been Democrats running the cities that have created the communities like this. It is not the highway that has created the communities. They often were a lot of small towns that grew up into big cities. Like, you can't look at the current now, like what the city is like now, and say that the division of prosperity is caused by the highway, right? And also, they're trying to make it out that this highway is a bigger barrier than it actually is. First off, it was much less of a barrier when it was new, when they were smaller and less trafficked. But now, even with them being bigger and having a lot more traffic on them, that does slow things down. They're only slowed down. They only are like that because of the density of the community around the highway, making it so that it has to be that big, and it makes it so that there's so much traffic moving through it. It's not the highway itself that caused that delay. And even with that delay, you can still travel over, under, or through highways. There's no requirement that someone in that community stay there. The highway doesn't prevent you from leaving. In fact, it facilitates you leaving. For example, California. People are leaving big California cities and going to other states for using the highway.
So this is such a ridiculous premise. I hesitate to even engage with it. But what I think is going on here is I think that there is a scrambled attempt at coming up with a more concrete excuse for reparations. So if you can pin down that a specific disparity, that's been the complaint on the right, is like there's not a specific disparity that exists in law. The things that happened to certain racial groups happened so long ago. We've explained, and I think I just explained again today, other more recent events have had enough economic impact that you can't say that being poor today is as a direct result of something that happened 200 years ago. So what the Democrats are struggling to find is more concrete excuses for reparations, more concrete excuses for why is it that minorities are in poor demographics. And I think that this is an example of that because, well, let's say that their premise is true. Let's say the highway is racist and that it's like actively suppressing black people. Well, what do you do about that? You can't tear down the highways. That's not going to happen. But what the Democrats might say is, well, we can't tear down the highways, but we could compromise. We could compromise with reparations.
No, Buttigieg actually suggested removing highways, removing access to travel outside of the community, and access to ability to commute to a job.
I support.
He suggested removing them as a racial justice issue. He suggested that.
I support removing highway connections between certain states. I could be convinced of that.
But he's talking about cutting off highways from some cities.
This is like a really great example. I think we've talked about it multiple times, and Dyer even said something about it today. But the Democrats and the Identitarians, they only know how to destroy things. They don't know how to build things. And so it's funny that Buttigieg goes into the Secretary, the Department of Transportation, and his first big idea is to tear down the national highway system. It's like, oh, like, I'm going to leave
no, to
my
be fair,
mark.
Fox, you didn't talk about tearing down the entire system, just the parts that are in black communities.
That's nuts. That's crazy.
Corrected.
I mean, it's so hard to like engage with this seriously, right? Like, it's so obviously like nonsense. Like, it's hard to like even pull information out of what they're saying because it's just like not coherent and based in reality. Like, oh, we're gonna just get rid of the highways. Like, what are you talking about? It's like, that's why it's like I hesitate to engage with it because it's just so stupid. I don't understand why. Like, I don't even really know how to respond to it. As Tucker famously said about Jill Biden's dissertation, it was like dogs barking. Like, you can't respond to it. Like, there's no information that was given. It's impossible to respond to dogs barking. It's not coherent. It's not English. There is no information being conveyed. And the left, I mean, we actually saw a real example of that today during that the very first story with the Ohio House, where the Democrats were literally just primal screeching. There was no information being conveyed. There's nothing to respond to. They're just making noise. And Buttigieg is about as close to just making noise with his mouth as he can be. I mean, he is saying words, but he's not stringing them together in a coherent fashion. Just like dogs, they're saying words, you know, bark, bork, woof, waff. But like, they don't mean anything in the context in which they're stringing them together. So
I want to point out that I watched 3 total long videos from Buttigieg talking about this topic, but it wasn't this clip.
Dyer and I were writing stories today, and I was working on a story, and Dyer started asking me about this, and then I kind of gave him my spiel on it, and then I started working on another story, and then he asked me more questions about it, and then I started working on a third story, and he was still working on this highway story, and I'm like, calm down. And he was getting more and more frustrated as the day went on.
I spent way too long on this, but I had to sit through 3 full videos of Buttigieg talking about this topic just to find this fucking video, and the only one I could find was one that was, like, as you saw, kind of hard to do on the show, right? It wasn't on YouTube or anything, but I had to sit through him explaining this argument 3 full times in like long segments. It was so fucking frustrating.
Dyer, would you rather have listened to an equivalent time of dogs barking or what they were saying on that video?
That's my people. I would definitely listen to dogs barking. Come on.
Dyer actually understands them. Okay. So our next story is tangentially related to the highways because the highways, what do they link you to? They link you between your job and the suburbs. Well, maybe we won't need the highways pretty soon because maybe we won't need the suburbs because Joe Biden's working on
destroy everything. That's all they do.
Let's get rid of everything. So, because I did pick out a picture for that one, I Googled suburb, and this was the first picture that popped up. So during the 8 years of the Obama administration, Obama led a campaign to eliminate the suburbs, which Trump famously said and called out, and people said he's a conspiracy theorist. When Trump was like, "Hey, they're trying to get rid of your suburbs. Like, you want me in there because I'm going to protect your suburbs. White middle class moms. You guys don't want to move into the city. It's dangerous there. I'm going to protect the suburbs." And everybody said he was a conspiracy theorist, and he was racist. So the Obama administration accused the suburbs of being instruments of institutional racism. I would imagine that similar to the highways, the houses were built out of structural racism.
Yes.
Which again, because structural lumber is so expensive and I want to remodel my house, I want to know where the hell I can get me some structural racism and whether or not it's as good as lumber. Because lumber is just through the roof. It's
probably better because it's so commonly used.
It's just not tenable to build a house with lumber these days. I mean, and this is not our fault, but like because of the Biden administration policies, the only thing that makes sense financially to build your house out of it is racism, because the only thing that's affordable.
Yeah, and it's time tested.
Yes. Okay. So the reasons why single family homes were racist very much blurred the lines between race and class, as they often do, because surprise, surprise, Black people live in the suburbs too.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, that's so racist just to be like, oh, well, Black people couldn't possibly live in the suburbs. Only rich people live out there. It's like, poor kids are just as smart as
Play the
kids.
blind clip. Play the blind clip.
I don't think I have the poor kids. Do I?
Yes, you do.
Oh, I do.
Poor kids are just as bright and just as talented as white kids.
God damn it. Fucking Biden. So now you know where you got that from. You got that from Obama. Okay, so essentially, more wealthy people lived in single-family homes in the suburbs, and less wealthy people congregated in densely packed multifamily buildings in the inner cities. The Obama administration then said that Black people tend to be less wealthy, so Black people were more likely to live in multifamily homes. All true so far based off the statistics. Their conclusion, the Obama administration's conclusion, was that single-family homes in suburban areas were exclusive and kept Black people out. Which, given 2008, what happened in 2000? Oh no, Dyer, you're going to get me going off about 2008 again. What was 2008 caused by? The 2008 financial collapse was caused by the government mandating that banks give out what are called subprime mortgages. Subprime mortgages are given to people who are of lower income and cannot typically afford a regular mortgage. But the government said that they wanted low-income people to have mortgages too. And, you know, the house market was booming then, so it didn't really matter because the assumption was, oh, well, the house prices will just go up forever, just like Bitcoin. And it doesn't really matter if poor people can't really afford their mortgage because they can just flip their house for a lot more money a year from now if they default. And this was typically aimed at minority communities, that they wanted, the government mandated that the banks give out subprime mortgages to minority communities that were not able to afford those mortgages. And then in 2008, when those minorities inevitably were unable to pay back their loans, that triggered a cascade that destroyed the entire housing market and took down a big portion of the stock market with it. So this idea that Black people were not invited into the suburbs towards the end of the Obama, or at any point during the Obama administration, Obama came in at the end of a absurd 10-year experiment to try to force as many minorities out into the suburbs, into houses that they could not afford as possible. I mean, it was institutionalized. People who normally could not afford to live in the suburbs, institutionalized moving them out there by any means necessary. Whatever printing we needed to do, whatever zero interest rate we needed to set, it was get them out there as quickly as possible and make sure that there was as much money available for them as there possibly was. We did that. And in my opinion, and I've said this before, in my opinion, subprime mortgages, that was reparations. That was America giving out reparations. And what did it do? It blew up the entire fucking economy.
The government-funded subprime mortgage crisis was the previous scheme for the same effect. This is the new scheme.
Yeah. So, but just the idea that Obama, less than like 5 years after we literally destroyed the American economy and took down a good part of the world economy in 2008 as well, we destroyed a whole bunch of humanity's economy trying to get poor people out of the cities and get them into houses that they couldn't afford in the suburbs. And then like less than 5 years after that blew up the world economy, Obama's like, yeah, but like you didn't try real subprime mortgages. Real subprime mortgages have never been tried.
Learned.
Yeah, real subprime mortgages have never been tried. Jesus Christ. Okay, so yeah, this is critical race theory bullshit where it's just like you're looking at demographics and assuming like, okay, you're just going to reverse engineer that it was racist. Whatever it takes, you're just going to reverse engineer that it was racist. Dyer,
Exactly.
Please continue.
So using that rationale, the Obama admin through HUD, ran an 8-year campaign to destroy the suburbs by linking HUD funding for cities on linking that funding to the cities, eliminating single-family zoning and replacing it with multifamily zoning, as well as requiring that these cities do drastic changes to the size and capabilities of their public transportation, sewage, water, and power. The HUD secretary at the time said that a concentration of poverty was de facto evidence of racist housing policy. So it has been illegal, by the way, to deny anyone buying or renting a home based on anything other than their ability to pay. And during subprime mortgages, even that was thrown out the window. It's been illegal for the last 50 years to discriminate based on housing. So the reason why more people that are not wealthy are going towards inner cities and multifamily homes and not towards suburban life is not due to racism, but due to other factors. And because of other factors, there are more people who are black who are in the low income, less wealthy category, but they're not exclusively there. There's a mixture of both. There's white people in poverty and there's black people who are not in poverty. And there's black people who are in the suburbs and there's white people in the multifamily homes.
Pop quiz, Dyer. Let's say you're a minority that lives in Chicago. Do you think that the reason that you're poor is more to do with the suburbs in Lincoln Park or more to do with MS-13 and gang violence in Chicago?
It's probably due to the crime, MS-13, the Democrat policies that
well, no, I was going to say it was the crime because the Democrat policy is like, obviously they're encouraging the crime, right? So it's just, if you just say the crime, it's implied that that's Democrat policies.
Yeah, it's kind of like hard
guess what party doesn't run Chicago and all the inner cities?
Yeah, not Republicans. So it's kind of hard to build up wealth when your job gets shut down because people keep looting it and the government doesn't charge them unless they steal more than $950 worth. It's kind of hard to get yourself out of poverty when the business you just started up gets burned down. It's kind of hard to get out of poverty when the facilities in your area are not functioning because the government is mismanaging them, right?
It's kind of hard to get out of poverty too when you're a minority child going through school and you're continuously bombarded with how you're inferior and you're unable to stick to a schedule and that you're unable to be analytical or think about science or you're just always going to be held down by white people. You need to always be looking over your shoulder. That could probably have something to do with a little bit of generational wealth issues too. Is just constantly beating that into their heads that they're inferior to everybody else. That could maybe have something to do with it.
There's a lot of factors. We can't really list them all, but there's a long list of factors that might result in you both being in poverty and staying in poverty.
If you look at the list at a little bit higher level, it's rather short. Leftism.
Fair enough. But if we're trying to get in detail. But I'll tell you what's not on the list. It's not the house.
I don't know, man. I just bought a house, and when I walked in the door, I was like, whoa, man. That is not... I know you were built in 1904, but, like, that kind of language is not okay in 2021.
Yeah, like the White House, houses do have an opinion of their own.
Yeah, I mean, like, man, if those walls could talk, they would just be shut. Never mind.
But yeah, it's not the fact that they're... No, thanks. The house is not what's making you poor. And that shouldn't... I shouldn't have to say that. That's insane. So, going back to it. So, it's been illegal to discriminate for housing for 50 years. That's not what's happening here. Despite their proposed anti-racist agenda, it's more likely that they have a far more cynical reason for destroying the suburbs. The suburbs tend to vote more conservative than the inner cities. Eliminating the suburbs and creating more dense cities would likely secure more Democrat votes and help them gain the electoral college.
And this is because of the way the Electoral College works, in that it has kind of a balance between population concentrations and then land area. The Democrats can have as many people voting in cities as they want, but at a certain point, there's a decreasing return on how many elected officials they can get into federal government with that. I mean, if they have another million minorities in New York, they're probably not going to be able to turn that into another congressional seat. But if they were able to push 1 million Democrat voters out into 20 different suburbs, they might be able to flip 5, 6, 10 congressional districts. But having that extra concentration in New York, they're not flipping any districts. They already got them. Getting more people there doesn't give them any benefit. So they got to find some way of getting those Democrat voters out into the suburbs where the suburbs are not as reliably blue, and try and flip them more reliably blue. A lot of, I mean, if you look at who wins county by county, typically Republicans, the map usually looks pretty red, but that's because the Democrats have so many people in very small areas. But if you look at voting maps that use the gradient system, a lot of those areas are purple, and it wouldn't take a whole lot of extra people pushed out into the suburbs to flip a lot of that purple to blue.
Yep.
Are you waiting on me?
Yep.
Many cities. Where am I at? Many cities during the Obama years caved when faced with losing millions of federal dollars worth of funding, and they rezoned large portions of their towns for high-rise, low-income apartments that the sewer and transportation systems and the electric systems were unable to support. The Biden administration says that they not only will restart the Obama-era, quote, affirmative fair housing plan, but they will go even further. The current version of Biden's infrastructure plan would include linking HUD funding to requirements that cities also limit the lot size of single-family home lots, and would allow/require the building of multifamily homes within close proximity to single-family homes.
So currently there's an exclusion zone where if you have single-family zoning, to maintain those neighborhoods not being like inner city neighborhoods or a bunch of multifamily homes side by side, there's a distance you have to keep those zones apart from each other. They want to remove that so someone can, say, buy a couple of lots in a suburb and then replace it with a multifamily home, add in a big apartment complex in the middle of someone's neighborhood.
Yeah.
Because just because you rezone it doesn't mean the houses disappear. Someone still has to, buy them and...
No, you just use the bulldoze tool, Dyer. Oh, wait, we're not talking about City Skylines, never mind.
That's kind of what BlackRock would do, though. So U.S. Today wrote this about the infrastructure plan. Biden's proposal would award grants and tax credits to cities that change zoning laws to bolster more equitable, not equal, access to affordable housing. A house with a white picket fence and a big backyard for the 4th of July barbecue may be a staple of the American dream, but experts and local politicians say multifamily zoning is key to combating climate change, racial injustice, and the nation's affordable housing crisis. I think the crisis is requiring affordable housing, but meaning those big high rises. That's the crisis. It's not that there's not enough housing.
Why do you think they chose the word equitable instead of equal access, Dyer?
Because they don't want, unbiased equal opportunity. They want an equal outcome.
What would be the problem with saying that we need equal access to the suburbs?
Because we already have equal access.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So there's a reason why they can't use the word equal access, because we already have equal access to the suburbs. So they have to change the language.
Exactly. So going along with critical race theory, there is a disparate outcome. So they must,
But is there a disparate outcome?
Racism.
There's a disparate outcome in voting blocks, but I don't know that there's a disparate outcome in demographics. Again, there are black people that live in suburbs. If there was no black people anywhere in the suburbs, then I would say, okay, maybe something's going on. But
the disparate outcome is based off of class. So like there are more black people are in the lesser wealthy category. So percentage wise, there's not a equal percentage.
But they're only doing this for the middle income locations. They're not doing this for like Martha's Vineyard.
Right. They're just trying to destroy the middle class. They're not trying to destroy the elites. Neighborhood.
So the destruction of the suburbs would turn safe communities into dangerous communities. This is the nature of closely packing people together that encourages more crime or makes crime more likely to happen. That
certainly makes crime easier.
Yeah, that's a really deep, thick concept. It is true, and we're not going to go through justifying it tonight. Maybe we would another time. But
we have on other.
Yeah, I think I think it holds up on its own. Just because it's late at night, I think you guys will have to go with us on that one. But that is a true statement that has a lot of thickness to it.
Yeah. With the government funding BlackRock buying up single-family homes and inflation pricing out new homeowners, it's very likely that the Great Reset will involve many of those single-family lots being converted into low-income housing.
The Biden administration is also actively working on tax reform that would treat increases in home value as taxable income, which with the rapidly increasing home values due to inflation would make continued home ownership impossible for the middle class. Not hard, impossible. For example, home values in some areas have gone up by 15% this year. I know that they've gone up by 24 to 40% in other areas. And at the 15% rate, for a modest home worth $200,000, this would be an increase in $30,000, which would then become taxable income. Most people would not be able to pay that year after year. It would be basically a backdoor wealth tax. It would make it just completely untenable for you to live in a middle income house with a middle class income. So we're kind of just referencing that tonight, but we're going to do a deeper dive on this plan for taxing increase in the house home value on another show. This is something that the Democrats are creating some legislation for right now. They're starting to grease the wheels on this and starting to get moving in this direction. Not a lot of people are talking about it. They have tried their best to hide what they're doing. They've dug up a old formula from the early 1900s that was a method that the government experimented with to try to calculate the value of income tax, taking into account asset inflation, like your house inflating in value, and how they would go about taxing it. They never implemented it, but they studied it. And what the Democrats are doing right now is they've dredged up this old formula. It's got a name. I can't remember what the name is off the top of my head. Like I said, we're going to do another show on this another time, sometime in the next month. And so the Democrats are trying to make this old thing. It's not a wealth tax, guys. It's this old thing. It's this old classic thing that we used to have it, or we used to talk about it, and it's not new. It's old. It's safe. It's okay. Don't worry about it.
It's not old things that we wouldn't want to do now.
Exactly. So we'll be talking more about that later on another show. But just know
it's still a developing story.
Yes.
Too.
Yes. Very developing. But this is the Democrats' plan is to. They want to, at the same time that they're making it essentially untenable for a middle-class family to own a house in the suburbs, and then somehow BlackRock is able to use all of this freshly printed Federal Reserve money to buy up all those houses, further driving up the value of your house. The Democrats will then come in with a new law that the increased value of your house is now taxable income, which means that you'll have to sell your house too. And who's going to buy it up? Well, BlackRock's going to buy it up. And then what are they going to do with it? They will probably knock down your house, rebuild it as a multifamily high-rise apartment, and then they will rent out a very small cubicle for you to live in, and it'll probably be more expensive than what your mortgage was.
You'll own nothing, eat bugs, and be happy.
Alternatively, if the Democrats think they're going to be able to tax the middle class on the increase in their home values. I think that January 6th will be a day at the beach.
Yes, I think.
I think that will be considered a day at the beach after the middle class has to pay that tax bill.
So this tax policy and these housing policies together, they're obviously a concerted effort towards one goal, right? It's all working in unison, and we can't go into complete detail on the tax policy. It's important. We'd be remiss to not mention how they work together, right? But also, it would basically make it impossible for the middle class to own homes. It'd be destroying the middle class because that's one of the best ways to grow wealth too. It'd be when they said equity, I bet you weren't thinking is it actually meant to bring us all down to the same level of poor. Equity for them means we'll all be equally poor. However, this may drive the government, if they choose to create programs to solve the problem they created by allowing grants and exceptions for some homeowners to allow there to be some middle class. However, if the government, Biden's government, were to provide grants and exceptions to allow some people to own single-family homes, who do you think that would be the beneficiaries of such programs? For you to know exactly who Biden would benefit to get racial justice in housing or housing justice, as they've called it. Well, all you got to do is look at the Biden-era farm subsidies and COVID business relief plans where they benefited exclusively black people, and they excluded COVID support for businesses that were shut down during COVID. They excluded white people, and they also excluded white people from farm subsidies. That is, both things that were shut down by the courts, but that's probably the direction that a Biden administration would provide support for the problem that they created. Something to look forward to.
I can't wait.
Yeah, you sound tired. Tired of this shit.
Yeah.
Oh, God, this is I think they're going to overplay their hands.
No, the box will be too expensive. TGP or TGB on YouTube. Boxes it's not very environmentally friendly either. So
at some point they're going to tax you for the increase in value on the cardboard box you're living in under the bridge.
Yeah. Yeah, I would recommend that if they're ever successful with this this tax scheme, I would recommend not paying the tax and purchasing something else with what you would have spent on that tax.
I'm
not going to say what it is, Dyer.
Bammo?
Bammo? Yes.
Right with Bammo.
Pew pew food. There we go. We'll go with pew pew food. You got to feed the pew pews, otherwise they don't pew.
Exactly.
Yes. All righty, guys. Well, you guys have a lovely 4th of July. Happy 4th of July, everybody. Dyer, I'm just gonna make you take this. You're gonna hate it, but you're just gonna have to take it. Dyer, thank you for your service, man. You're out there fighting the good fight. People like you are why we're able to celebrate the 4th of July, and we all really appreciate it. So thank you very much, buddy, and thank you guys for supporting us on this channel, for listening to us tonight. And I hope you guys all have a fantastic 4th of July. I hope you used that extra 16 cents that Biden saved you wisely. And let's just remember, take tomorrow to remember what it is that we are fighting for and why we are so interested in the current politics.
Thank you. Happy 4th. Dyer Wolf out.